What is today? Wednesday, July 29th. The first thing on our agenda is our consent agenda. Did anyone get a chance to review the consent agenda? And if so, can we have a motion to approve?
I did. Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any questions, edits to the minutes? Any questions on the warrants?
Nope.
Okay, hearing none. All in favor to approve the consent agenda, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstention? Okay, thank you all. Next, we have our visitors' comments. And we have quite a few visitors. So let me start with this. We will not have any questions or comments related to the draft plans tonight, but we are planning a public forum for comments and questions for Monday, the 3rd of August. And we're gonna move our meeting, next week's meeting, to Wednesday, the 5th. Depending on how things go, you will have the opportunity to make comments. The public will have the opportunity to make comments at that meeting on Wednesday as well.
Emery, may I ask you a question? There's going to be a meeting on Monday. You didn't say what time.
Because we didn't post it yet, so I will.
Okay.
I will have to check with the committee members to see their availability. If we can start sooner, we may start half hour earlier than we normally do, just in case, especially for the public forum. But good question. I don't have the answer. Hopefully we'll post tomorrow. Actually, we will post tomorrow. Yep.
Thank you. And Jackie, I know you're on. You'll send myself and Cheryl an email about that, please.
Yes.
Cool.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the reason why I'm saying this, if you have questions about the draft plans that you haven't seen yet, that we're gonna start talking about tonight, you may want to really, wait until Monday, where we'll have a lot more understanding around those plans, and we will be able to answer some of your questions at that time. What we cannot answer, we will be able to get back to you on. With that, I don't want to really curtail any dialogue, any comments that you may have. So with that in mind, if you have comments that you would like to share with us, please raise your virtual hands and Alex will move you to the panel. Okay, I see Beth. Let's start with Beth, Alex.
Yeah, well, I was about to say that. All right, Beth, go ahead.
Okay, hi. My name is Beth Perron, and I've been a teacher at East Middle School for 15 years. I joined the reopening committee because I feel like I can look at a situation objectively and come up with creative ideas. I love data, problem solving, and research, and I have a medical background from spending years in the hospital with a child who had cancer multiple times. Due to this, I have a unique perspective. I know what it's like for children to come out the other side of quarantine. For we were quarantined during my son's illness for far longer than the community has due to COVID. We spent years in isolation while the world spun around us. My children were 1, 5, and 9 when it all started, and it was 3 years before we were able to go out in public without restrictions, without worry. I can tell you now, as my oldest is a teenager and my youngest is school age, parents breathe, the news is good. The research is clear that all children need is one adult that they can talk to, that loves them, and they will get through this just fine. That their development will not be stunted over a year of having to stay home. In fact, there's a certain maturity, resilience, thankfulness, and compassion gained from such experiences. This is just a brief period of time in the realm of things. Our children are resilient, but this disease is too. And while I hope that it would be long gone by now, it continues to spread around the country and close to home with the recent outbreak at Bay State. And the newest research isn't any more comforting, showing that children older than 10 spread it just as much as adults. In addition, according to our recent staff survey, half of my colleagues are in at-risk groups or live with those in high-risk groups. We have a staff of 108 adults and approximately 60 at East Meadow alone, and we will be sharing one office, one small teacher's room, 2 copiers, and staff bathrooms that on a normal day have a perpetual line. When we are not in common areas, we will be in rooms tightly packed in some grade levels with as many as 23 students. And the children will be spending hours sitting independently in desks facing forward on their Chromebooks, without easily done movement breaks nor group work. In a typical day, I ask you to consider how long an 8-year-old can sit still at a desk. How about 6? I can tell you from experience that a 3rd grader tops out at 20 minutes. We cannot gather on the carpet, stand up and sing, and I'm not even sure if choral reading will be safe. I won't be able to pull small groups to the table for instruction. I won't be able to do reading groups, which are essential for children in learning to read. Some children will be so far from the board, they won't even be able to see my instruction. How will I decide who gets those seats? How is that fair? How will I be able to speak to a student without everyone hearing? And yes, we will be creative, and we're going to come up with as many solutions as we can. But you see, the more I dive into these very necessary safety guidelines, the more I begin to realize that in-school instruction with a full class of children may not necessarily be better for learning, nor for equity, or for emotional development. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Beth. Appreciate it. Anyone else?
Looks like Cheryl raised her hand. She can unmute yourself, actually, if she wants to talk. I mean, it's up to Emery,
Go
actually.
ahead, Cheryl. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Cheryl Danette, and I'm the incoming president of the Granby Educators Association. The GEA took a survey of its members last week to understand their needs on the return to school. This survey was taken before the release of the 3 reopening plans, which will be presented tonight. Please keep in mind there could potentially be significant staffing issues due to the results of our survey. From that survey, we learned that 50% of our staff have family members living with them, or they themselves have one or more underlying medical conditions that are considered high risk according to the CDC guidelines. There could also be staff members who will have childcare issues, which will require them to take a leave of absence. Administration will have the difficult task to find qualified substitutes in the event that 50% of our staff may require to take family or medical leave. We, as a union, want to make sure that the health and safety of our students and their families, as well as the health and safety of our staff and their families, is always in the forefront of discussions regarding any and all of the proposed reopening plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Anyone else? Okay.
All right, Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm an RN, recent graduate. The studies that I've read said that kids really don't play a big part in the transmission. My daughter's 13, and I also have a 3.5-year-old. They both want to go to school. I don't know exactly what the 3 plans that are going to be proposed for reopening, but they just wanted me to make sure I weighed in and said that they want to go back to school. So whatever we can do to safely do that, I'm on board with that. That's pretty much it.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it.
Sure.
All right. Anyone else? Alex, just for our education, multiple people can raise their hands at the same time, right? Okay. I just
Correct. Yeah.
sure whether, yeah. Okay, I think that's it for tonight. All right, so just want to make sure that if you joined a little later, since the number is a little higher, we're going to have a public forum on Monday, the 3rd, and we're going to have a lot more opportunity to review the draft plans, and we're going to have that's going to be the only thing, obviously, on our agenda. And we're going to have time to answer questions and receive your comments and share what we know and maybe learn from what we don't know, but just so that everyone knows. Okay, well, thanks to our visitors for their comments. We're gonna move to the next agenda item. Mark is not gonna join us for the summer, we said, right? Even though he's on the agenda. So let's move to our new business, and we're gonna, Carol, would you prefer that we do a couple of things and then spend more time on the reopening plan, or is that what you had asked? Okay.
Yeah, maybe do
All right.
the vote and the update, maybe?
Okay. So hopefully those will not take a lot of time. Let's just get those out of the way. We're moving to item B in our new business section. That one is going to require our vote, and that's what we tagged as school building audit reports. So those of you who have been in the East Meadow School for the last couple of years, you're probably asking why we're still talking about this, but the projects are really long. They have a fairly long introduction period, a lot of discussion. In the same fashion, they have a long tail as we wrap up. So we finished what's called the warranty period a little while ago, which was a period during which if anything was missed in the project, we had the opportunity to go back to the project manager and create a list for them to take care of. Also, once that is done, there is the state side of it. For those of you who were not potentially part of the process, the state really monitors every single step during these school building projects. And then they come back to the specific districts to say that they reviewed what we submitted. In this case, what they are submitting to us is the results of their final audit. So this will be the last time they're asking us for a sign off on an audit. It's primarily related to the finances. And as a result of that, when we send it back, it's going to hopefully lead to the state wrapping up and closing this project. And that will basically mean that we're going to receive the last installment of the reimbursement that we're expecting from the state. And then the full ownership of the building turns over to our town. So with that introduction, I had posted the documents related to this topic in our folder. First, let me ask for a motion to approve. And then we're going to have plenty of time to discuss if you have any questions.
I'll make a motion to approve the school building audit reports.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Now, any questions, any comments, anything that did not make sense?
I'm okay.
All right. If you don't mind, I will ask.
Stephanie, you're muted.
Sorry, there we go. I did have one question.
Sure.
Hopefully I'm not speaking out of context here, but I recall I had gone to one of the select board meetings prior to COVID, and they had brought up some of the reports for signing off the building. Did the town end up signing off on the building?
No,
or
we did not sign off yet. Actually, we received these documents that you looked at from Chris Martin. Chris is our main contact point in this project. And that was Chris's request to have this on our agenda so that we can talk about it and give our signatures, our approval for the audit. And he's going to send it back to the state for them to finalize their process.
Okay, I just had recalled there were a few very technical issues. Just I remember some electrical and I feel like some plumbing that we weren't certain of, and I just wanted to make sure that was resolved.
So let's just do this. I was going to ask Adam, since Adam and Bill were part of this project since the beginning, I think, or they were part of a good large portion of the project. And both Adam and Bill reviewed those files and let us know that they were okay with it. But that said, I will turn it to Adam for him to comment on your question or if there's anything else that he would like to add.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, they're everything that needed to be done in the building has been taken care of. You know, there's some things that come up here and there, and John Sullivan, our maintenance coordinator, would be better to speak about this. Unfortunately, he's not on tonight. There are some things that come up that we have to deal with. And like Emery said, we're out of the warranty period right now. So if anything comes up, they are at the cost of the district and or the town, but not back to the building project. But we met, myself, Bill, John, the project managers. Bill, you can chime in too if you want. I'm not sure when we met, Emery, I'm not sure if you were part of that meeting either. But there was a big checklist that we had gone over. It was probably last fall. I don't even know time now. It goes by too fast, but it was probably last fall, maybe beginning of school year. There was a huge checklist that we went over with the town, with the project on things that we needed to have done prior to us signing off on documents like the one that you see in the folder tonight. To my knowledge, all of that stuff has been completed. And the things now that come up are just, we need to remember that building's, I want to say almost 3 years old at this point, or parts of it, right? So there are some things that are coming up that we might need to replace, that might be broken and we need to fix. And that's separate from the project. That's on the district and the town at this point. So as far as I know, for us to close out the project, all of those items on the checklist have been completed.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Like I said, I just recalled that one meeting I had gone to, and they weren't the town wasn't comfortable signing off until a few things had been resolved. So I just wanted to make sure that that was all buttoned up. So thank you.
Yep.
I'm sure we'll hear from them if there is anything that's outstanding. But as Adam mentioned, these are periodic checkpoints, and that punch list that was created included everything at the time that was known to folks in the district that were not working as intended, that did not really function, or that were not designed as intended. They were, as far as we know, they were all taken care of and the punch list had been completed. If there's anything else, I'm sure we're gonna, we'll receive another communication. But given that this is really something that we received from the town for us to approve, and as far as I understand, it's the last step, I'm assuming, we're in good shape.
Great, thank
I
you.
did see Bill pop on. I'm not sure if he wants to comment or not.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So thanks, Emery and Adam. Yep. I think, we're in good shape due to, a lot of due diligence on John's part and our part on following through on certain things. There's still certain things that are going to be open. Like there were some issues with some of the heating, plumbing and things like that, but they've granted us additional warranties and things like that. So there's been a lot of work on our end to make sure everything was resolved. And at this point, we're comfortable with where we're at. So that's why we went forward and let everybody know that, we're very comfortable with everything. In the follow through on those companies are going to follow through. And they actually gave us an additional warranty from the time of the last problem. They gave us an additional warranty. So we're in good shape with all of that, I think. And the only thing that John is waiting for at this point, Emery, is the manuals from some of the companies. So I think if we can put that somewhere in there, I talked to him just before I left the building today, and he was saying the only thing he's waiting for is some of the closeout manuals that give him all of the information he needs. I don't have a list, and Adam, maybe we can get that list from him, but that would be it, I think. And that's in the process. So other than that, I think we're good.
Cool. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? The primary content of the audit reports that you received were related to finances, but these are good questions. Absolutely, we want to make sure that we do our due diligence, and that, as you heard, that due diligence is ongoing. Also, as you heard Adam say, we're going to eventually take ownership of the building fully, and some things at times will require our attention. And John has been working closely with everyone in the building to make sure that we keep that building in shape for a long time. Any other questions, comments? Okay. We had a motion and we had a second. With that, all in favor to approve the, let me see how we said it, school building audit reports, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Okay, approved unanimously. Thank you all very much. I know that this was a very busy week for reading, and thank you for taking the time to go through all those documents.
Emery, just real quick, I know you and I had talked, I had put a document relating to this in DocuSign. I don't know, are you going to sign this audit report wet ink? So do you want that piece of paper signed with pen as well?
I can sign that one on DocuSign. So
okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. Thank you for asking. All right. The next item is related to the resolution regarding standardized testing. I wanted to add this here. I know that I had a couple of conversations possibly with some of our committee members as well, but also I started having this conversation outside our school committee with neighboring school districts and others. There is a concern that since our plans changed dramatically in March this year with the pandemic and the subsequent closure. And given that right now our plans will not necessarily mean that we will be able to catch up quickly, there is this conversation going on indicating and suggesting that we may want to postpone standardized testing across the state for a number of years. I did not really see that the resolution is being adopted in large numbers with a final resolution across the state. So even though it's there, I would like to keep it there, and I would like to bring it when we know that we are all comfortable with the number of years we're going to be asking to postpone the standardized testing. The initial version that I had heard had about a couple of years on it, but I think the latest version that I has up to 4 years on it. That means request is to postpone standardized testing for 4 years, and there is some background explanation as to why some folks are asking 2 years, some folks are asking 4 years, but it seems that it is shaping up. And as soon as there's a version that school districts are comfortable to start discussing and approving, I will bring that resolution back to the school committee. But given that it is on our agenda, are there any questions on that one? Or any comments? Okay. So we're going to table that that item until next time on, as I said, we have the resolution for us to be able to.
We did not have a copy of that resolution though, right?
There is no resolution yet that actually is finalized. That's why.
I didn't think so. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Emery, I just wanted to say, as part of the MTA, I appreciate you keeping that on your agenda because it is majorly important. Whether we go back full, remote, or some kind of a hybrid, we don't need the pressure on the teachers to get the kids up and to what the testing would require.
No, yeah, thank you. Agreed. Good points. You know, since we've been having these conversations about standardized testing for a while, I made no secret in the past, and you know, I will not stop now, that I'm not necessarily a huge fan of standardized testing to begin with. But I don't think that, personally, I don't think that it is really fair to subject our students across the state, and particularly in our district, to a standardized test that they are not prepared for, among all the other things that is not necessarily the top priority. We will absolutely do what we need to do to make sure that they are catching up and they are learning, and learning more than the standardized tests expect from them. But you know, until everyone is ready to make sure that there is fairness in the process, you know, we should consider pushing it out, and that's why I agree with you that we should bring it back.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the. All right, with that, let's move to the two agenda items that I'm guessing everyone has been waiting for. I'm saying two because items A and D in one way or another, they are connected to each other. The reason why we're going to be talking about revising the school calendar for the upcoming school year is related to the reopening plans. What we will do tonight, as I mentioned, we're gonna go through a summary of the process of the plans. Stephen and Bill will have will share the plans or the summary plans related to their respective buildings. Carol will give us an overall view of the district plan. So we are hoping that this will be the beginning of the discussion. I don't want to really go too deep because I know that there were some things that Carol wanted to share, but I will tell everyone that we will be sharing the draft version that we will need to really send to DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, by Friday. We're going to be sharing that version with our entire community. And when I say that we're going to have a public forum on Monday, I'm hoping that that will allow all of us to have a fuller and more informed conversation. All that said, I have a few points that I wanted to make as we start the process. The first thing is related to the work that's been done. As you heard in our visitors comments section, Beth mentioned that there was a lot of work that went into it. We cannot really minimize the amount that a lot of folks spent on creating these plans, on having conversations and at times challenging conversations to be able to create a framework that will eventually become the plan that we submit to the state. I was having a conversation this morning, I think it was with one of our committee members who was participating in one of those two groups. And she mentioned that I believe the meetings were 14 hours. And I think that was outside all the research that folks went and did on their own, outside the readings that they had to do, outside the edit time that a lot of people spent. As I was going through the Google Docs, I always saw some folks in there adding details, correcting, or making changes. So I want to start by thanking everyone who first raised their hand, and I know that a lot more people did. That is a wonderful thing to have in a district like ours. Not only those who participated, but everyone who raised their hands, thank you. Those of you who were part of the groups, I know that your work is ongoing. It's not done yet, but thank you for all the time that you spent and all the effort and mind that you put in those plans. And we'll hopefully have your input, more of your input in the coming meetings, just like Beth shared with us earlier and Cheryl did. I just want to make sure that there is no easy answer to what we're trying to do with these plans. Again, my personal opinion is that we found ourselves in a situation where a lot of responsibility and accountability was dropped on our local districts. Personally, I don't think it's fair. It is great that we have the ability as local districts to have our say and shape our plans, but the way all the requests and requirements came to us, at least in my view, was really very demanding, very challenging, and it was many times without a clear context and request. So a lot of folks who try to understand, I'm not talking about those groups that worked on these plans, but a lot of folks who were involved, who were parents, educators, community members, folks from our school community, who were trying to do their own homework and understand what was going on. They really had to invest a lot of their time to be able to understand, because it took a while for all those guidelines and requirements to become a little more clear day by day, and that presented its own challenge. As I mentioned, there is no easy answer to this because this is about health. It is about how we look at the risks around us at a time that is really unprecedented for us, at the very least, since we talk about this being a 100-year event. So obviously, the answers are not easy either, not only to understand, but to find the relevant answers. Not only that, as you will find out, there is really no one answer to any one of those questions. There isn't really no one concern related to any one of those items. There is really no one type of support for any one of those items. So we're dealing with an issue that brings us together, but possibly at times really divides us because our opinions, our views around these suggestions will not always overlap. What we are hoping to do, what we believe the task of our school districts and our communities is that we come up with that starting point, that common ground, that will be the best option for the students in our district and the school community who is part of our school district. And as you know, we always included folks who are in our schools, our educators, administrators, all others who are supporting and nurturing our school districts in that concept of school community, but our parents, our members outside those groups as well. I know that many of you have been very involved, and I know that there are a lot of things going on in different districts. And I know that we are asking ourselves, if they are doing this, are we doing the same thing? If they are focusing on something, are we going to do that? Or it may be that, hey, they just basically, refuse to do certain things. Why are we even still talking about those? So I will ask all of us to really try to remain as objective as possible as folks will present the draft version of these plans. All of these districts, including ours, we are reflecting our individual needs. Not only that, sometimes we do not understand necessarily what is happening in some other districts until we are exposed to some of their realities. And such reality hit Carol and I last week when we joined this large meeting that was organized by the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, where we had about 300 or so participants in this Zoom meeting. And we had some breakout sessions to talk specifically about the reopening plans. We were beyond surprised. We were shocked to hear from a large section of those participants that they had no idea. And these were members, school committee members. Some of them were educators in the school district or stakeholders in the district, but school committee members who had no idea whatsoever what was going on with their plan, what the timeline was, what was going to be in it. And they did not know how and how soon they were going to be able to find out what was going to be in those plans. So while our process may not be perfect, and this goes to all districts probably, I want to assure everyone that the primary focus was to remain as open and transparent as possible by including everyone, to make sure that we were focusing primarily on the well-being, safety, and health of those folks who are in our overall school community. And the other aspect that we tried to really focus on was the fact that we know this is a divisive issue across our country. We know that there are views one way or the other, that you can just go to both extremes and you can find anything from not opening any schools at all across the country to this not being a real issue and everybody returning to their schools as we did last year, for instance. We, all of us involved in these processes, we aimed to divorce ourselves from any political concern altogether. The primary goal and the primary guidance for those involved in this process was science, really. What is science telling us? What are we learning? What are we getting from the Center of Disease Control? What are we getting from Department of Public Health? What are we getting from our local Board of Health? How are we able to understand what those mean to us? And how are we getting the guidance and some of the requirements from the state and really fit them into those guidance and guidelines, health guidance and guidelines that we were receiving? So I would like to ask everyone, as I wrap this up, to keep an open mind, that there will be some things that you agree with, there will be some things that you will not agree with. Our goal over the next few days and meetings to find the version of these plans that is best suited for our community, our students, our school district, our teachers, our school, all those who are in our school district, from an educational perspective, but also from a medical perspective, from an ethical and moral perspective. So please, let's keep an open mind, as I said, and let's engage in these conversations to find that common ground and how we can find the best solution for everyone involved. So with that, I will turn it to Carol.
Thank you, Emery. And I totally agree with you about the need to thank this committee. They have worked tirelessly these 2 weeks. I mean, it was only 2 weeks ago that we talked about, we need to make sure we are 6 feet apart. And, I tasked the principals in doing feasibility studies. They are tonight going to share with you the results of their feasibility studies that basically outlined their work. So they'll be able to let you know which classrooms, can get 6 feet, how many desks. And then from there, they went and they built in-person programming, a hybrid model, and a remote model. The one thing I want to be clear about, the remote model is designed if the district would totally go remote. It's not, we haven't designed a model if parents choose remote from the beginning. If the district chooses hybrid and we still have parents that want to do remote, we're going to need to balance that with staffing. Right now, the remote that you hear will be the remote if we go all remote as a district. The other thing is, Alex, I want you to make sure that you let Megan Shepard in, because in all of the developments of these 3 plans, we also had to have a separate section for our special student populations. So our students on IEPs, 504s, and ELLs, and high needs. So Megan will speak to that when Stephen shares his plans. Megan will share how that'll impact the high school, and when Bill shares his, she'll speak to how it affects East Meadow. You also mentioned, about the input we got. So I want to let everybody know that every single person who applied to be a part of the committee, they too received the plan this week. So they were able to make comments. They sent them to me and I shared them with the committees and the principals. So, we did have, two school committee, two parents, and so on. But we also had probably another 25 people that from the community that also got to make some comments, because my feeling was the more people that had their eyes on this, you know, the better we would be. So with that, I will turn it over to Bill, who will talk about the feasibility study at East Meadow, and he and Megan then will talk about the 3 plans.
Thanks, Carol.
You're welcome.
So we've spent quite a bit of time in the building looking at what we can do, where we can fit students, following the guidance of school committee. The original recommendation from DESE was 3 to 6 feet, so we started with that. The school committee then said, no, we wanted to do 6 feet. So we went through and we went into every classroom and we looked at what we can do for 6 feet apart and giving the teachers at least 8 to 10 feet of space in the front of every classroom. We can get 20 desks 6 feet apart in every classroom, leaving that teacher that 8 to 10 foot space in the front. So, and that's comfortable. 20 is the max though. And you know, even if we were looking at, you know, going 3 feet apart, what we found was, you know, 3 to 5 feet apart doesn't give you much more space when it comes right down to it, because you're still having to allow for that space. So 20 desks max per room is what we came down to. And I put the slide into our plan so that school committee can see that, and we can share that presentation if school committee chooses with the public. But all of the general ed classrooms can go 20 seats. I also put in that slide, you know, where we're at with the population and what that looks like and what each grade level has, how many classes there are, and what that looks like and what we would need to do for that. And then we looked at the cafeteria space. We broke that out. We physically moved the tables so we could make sure that there was 6 feet between each seat and table. And we can comfortably fit up to 72 max 6 feet apart in the cafeteria. So we would be able to feed 1 grade level at a time in the cafeteria. And the plan would be that we would have the other students file in to get their lunches before each group came in to sit. So there would never be 2 large groups in there at a time. In other words, only 1 group would be in there getting their lunches and sitting down. The other lunch would have already come in, gotten their lunches and left. So we've taken that into consideration. We've really carefully tried to play out every scenario. We went through the hallways and we figured out what would be probably the best way to have one-way hallways. And what we would do in a case of emergency situations. We still have to talk to first responders and see what that's going to look like, you know, but we're comfortable with the fact that when we do the one way, having markers on the floor so that students can maintain that 6 foot distance and go from there. We looked at outdoor spaces, and fortunately that we sit on 20 acres, we have a lot of outdoor space. So we could have every classroom outside in a different spot if that's what needed to happen. And you know, they could be socially distant out there, so they could take their masks off. I don't think it's going to happen where everybody's out there at once. Our plan is to maybe assign each classroom their space where that's their area they can go, and different times, so that way it's all regimented. So we've taken that into consideration. We've looked at what it would look like if you know, we have you know, a couple grade levels where there's more students than we have room for, which is part of the recommendation to look at grade 6 and seriously consider that we probably have to move grade 6 to the high school for this year, and make sure that they're, you know, we can get them up there. And even at that, they might need to be moved into 3 classrooms at the high school, because right now there's 24 and 25 students. Over the last 2 weeks, we've had 5 families move into Granby and contact us about attending school. You know, those are residents. Those are people still moving in and still asking about registering and still planning to send their kids to school. So, you know, until we come up with a plan and we post that plan and we poll families, we have to go with the numbers we have, and make room for that. Along those lines, 2nd grade is another level right now where we might need to break out into 4 classrooms for this coming year and able to maintain that 6 foot distance. In a regular year, it wouldn't be a problem because we could easily fit 25 desks in a room. But with this, the max we can get in there is 20 desks, and there's 23 students in those classrooms.
Can we
So-
ask questions, or do we have? Are we waiting till the end, or saving them till the poll, Emery? Or
Can we just wait until the end of each school presentation, if you don't
Sure.
mind? Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Bill.
No, that's fine. And I tried to incorporate as much of that as I could into that slideshow presentation as to what we're looking at, and to be as honest as possible up front so that everybody knows what it is. I mean, a feasibility is a feasibility. We're talking about the what ifs and the thens and all of that. So we're looking at all of those pieces. And I think, having all that in front of us moving forward, we can come up with the solutions we need to do. As far as our in-person plan, that takes care of our in-person plan. If we need to stagger, one thing we're talking about is possibly staggering our entrance into school so that we would have possibly 2 bus runs in the morning and 2 bus runs in the afternoon, depending on how many students need transportation. So we're looking, if that's the case, we might have to alter the start time on the of the school and change the schedule a bit to maintain the 6.5 hours that the teachers contractually are in front of students. So we put that in the plan. We address that as well. Pick up and drop off for parents will have to be staggered as well. The way we'll stagger it, of course, is by families and by demographics, so that families would be kept together at the same times, and kids on the same streets would be kept together for transportation purposes. So we've been looking at all of that and considering all of that. If it comes to our hybrid plan, the hybrid plan we're looking at would be 2 days in for students, a day in the middle. So Monday, Tuesday would be group A. Wednesday, everybody would be off, which would allow the building to be deep cleaned on Wednesday. Thursday, Friday would be group B. The building would be cleaned on Friday afternoon. It would sit Saturday and Sunday. Group A would come back on Monday and Tuesday again. Wednesday would allow for deep cleaning. Group B would be Thursday and Friday. We felt that this was a model after talking to some of our families and considering daycare and people's work schedules that maybe they could work around if it came down to that. Parents that had to work from home, set their schedules and things like that. Ideas of a rotating schedule came up, and that just proved to be a nightmare, we felt, for parents that needed to work remotely on those days their kids were home. So the last plan, of course, is the total remote learning, and that's pretty well spelled out in there. We've made some changes to what we did last year, utilizing more Google Classroom across the board. So every teacher would be using Google Classroom. All students would have their Google login, and there'll be an easy login for them. And everybody would have access to that. Another part of that would be that all teachers would be teaching from school on that remote learning plans, so that teachers would be required to be in their classrooms providing the instruction, because Megan can talk about this in a minute, but whether we do full, hybrid, or remote, our high needs learners still have to be in the building. And that's not just a few teachers, that's going to incorporate several teachers into that plan. So that's why if we're going to do this, we're going to have to make sure that everybody's available and everybody's there, they'd have their technology, and they would go from there. So we've tried to put all that in place. We've tried to look at all the considerations. We're hearing comments from everybody. We're hearing comments that, oh my gosh, my child did so awful with remote learning and they didn't learn anything and it was tough on us. And, we know that we had several students that were not engaged last year in the remote learning. And we also know that there's families out there that will maybe prefer the remote learning over coming back into the building. So we're trying to put together the plans with as much, as Emery said, as much thought, as much consideration, focusing on what we know. So, and I think that's a big one, right? We're focusing on the information we have. Right now, I think CDC guidelines are that it lives 48 hours on surfaces, but that's changed over the last 6 months several times. So even though we're focusing on that this minute, that could change down the road and they could say, oh, no, it lives for 24 hours. But under our considerations, we're looking at the latest information, what we have now and what we need to do. So I think that captures pretty much all of the considerations. You know, as Carol mentioned, we did have summer school in the building, and we did have, you know, the students in the building learning, and you know, we had protocols in place and safety in place, and we learned a lot from that as well. So it was really good to have that happen as well. So I think that I've covered everything without getting into too much detail. A lot of this has to do with what school committee decides. So if school committee decides that no, absolutely not, you know, 6th grade moving over to the high school is not even on the table, then we're going to have to look at our hybrid learning, because there's no way that we can safely have all students 6 feet apart, because we have that 5th grade group with 27 and 28 in the class right now. And the only way to do that is to split them into 3 classes. And like I said, 6th grade possibly will need 3 classrooms as well. So we've developed, we're pretty much at a standstill with the information we have now and where we're at, until we get some direction on, you know, what we're feeling is the next step.
Thank you, Bill. Jen.
Okay, so a couple of the questions that I have.
Jen?
I'm actually, yeah.
Jen?
Before you start, I just want to make sure that Megan has a chance to talk about.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yep.
I hope you guys can hear me okay.
Yes, we can
Okay.
hear you. We can
Okay.
see you. Go ahead.
Perfect. So just to follow along with what Bill said, so Granby Public Schools were committed to providing that free, appropriate public education for, while also protecting the health and safety of our students with disabilities and other high needs. And so regardless of what the plan is in place, we still have to provide IEP services, ESL services, and there are just certain populations of students that really, struggled with remote learning. And so when we received DESE's guidelines for special education services, they really said, prioritize your high and complex needs students, prioritize your preschool students. They just don't, learn the same. They're not as, they don't benefit this in the virtual remote learning model. And that was very clear to us when we had our students come in this summer and see, how much they've been able to grow even in the short few weeks that we've had them here. So just to comment on East Meadow. So if we're full in person, we are going to have provide all of our IEP services. We may have to change some of those things making sure that students and staff are safe. And so it's going to require that careful planning and communication with families on how they may be different. It may still be some teletherapy. It really depends, even though we're at school, in order to keep that distance. But definitely we're doing structured lessons throughout and working towards providing them what they need at their level, and working with families on making sure that we are providing them their services as appropriate. In the hybrid model, we have the cohort A and the cohort B. On the days that the cohort is, the students, high need students, are not supposed to be in the building because they're assigned to a cohort, perhaps they're still going to be able to come into the building and receive their services as long as safety guidelines are in place and we are able to accommodate them, again, prioritizing our high and complex needs students. I think at this point, because the deep cleaning is an essential part of that, we would estimate that they would come in 4 days a week, and on that 5th day, we would provide services in a different way and communicate with families on what their needs are to support them. In a remote model, they would still be coming in, those high and complex needs students and our preschool students, and again, likely that 4 days a week, so that we can still have the cleaning, because there will be people in our building despite being in a remote model. And so also, when we have our paraprofessionals who are working with students who are, need to be within that 6 feet, they are wearing additional PPE. They're really considered direct support professionals and follow a whole another set of guidelines and training in order to learn how to put on and take off a PPE appropriately. And that, let's see. And I think that's it for what I have right now for the elementary school. So I'll turn it over for questions.
Go ahead, Jen.
Okay, so my initial thing is I'm actually shocked it's only the 6th grade that needs to move to the high school, because when this whole 6th grade transition conversations were happening, we were 2 classrooms short is what the number was. And at some models, we were looking at potentially 3 classrooms short. So if we can only have 20 kids in a student, I come up with, we're now 5 classrooms short. And that's using the numbers that we had. And I don't have accurate kindergarten numbers, because those kindergartners that I had would now be 1st graders and the 5th graders would be 6th graders. So the 6th graders would already be in the high school. So I'm just concerned that we actually have enough room in East Meadow to do a full in-person spread out, because we were so short before with classroom sizes of 24 and 25. And now we've brought that math down to only 20 students. So I was hoping that maybe we could get some of that information just so that it's very clear to everybody how that works out, because the math's not working for me. And I'm sure you all have looked at it, but it's just not adding up in my head.
So Jen, I put a slide in there that has the current population, the what will be the population for the upcoming school year. And I put down the class sizes for each classroom.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that slide, Bill, so I don't know where it is.
I hope did the presentation get uploaded to the folder? Does anybody have that presentation?
Well, there's multiple versions of the presentation. I'm just not sure. The one that
No, it was it's a separate slide presentation.
No, it's only the document. We don't have a presentation.
Yeah, there's no presentation. So none of that is here. So can someone upload that for us so we can see it?
Carol or Jacqueline, are you able to upload it to that folder? I apologize.
You sent it, I thought, Bill, to Jacqueline.
Yesterday.
All right, let me see. Jacqueline,
So Jen, at the current model right now, the class sizes are under 20 for every grade level, except for 2nd grade is at 23, 23, 23. So that's why we might possibly need to go to that, depending, if all families come back, right? So if a few families opt out and say we're going to do remote learning, then we would be able to go with the 20, 20, 20. If 6th grade moves over to the high school, that gives us 2 classrooms. That gives us the ability to put 5th grade into 3 classrooms. If 6th grade needs 3 classrooms, they would be over at Granby Junior Senior High School in 3 classrooms. That's not going to affect the need for us next door. That would allow us that extra room to spread out to put, a 3rd, 2nd grade classroom if we have to. And that's the only ones that we need right now would be 2nd grade and 5th grade. All the rest are under 20.
Well, because I have the kindergarten class, which would be 1st grade at 57. So that would need to be 3 classrooms, because we can't go over that 20.
Right, we
So
have 3. We have 3 in 1st already.
Okay. And then, so it just looks like the math isn't making sense to me, so I'll just wait till I see that slide. I'm shocked, honestly, that we only need 2 extra classrooms, bringing the numbers down to 20, because we were struggling bringing them down to below 26 at the max, and still 2 classrooms short. So one of
the things that happened over the summer was we needed to hire a new teacher for our social emotional learning classroom. So we posted for a social emotional learning teacher, and at the same time, the SPED services evaluated the number of students they have and caseload, and we didn't replace one of our grade level special ed teachers that moved into the general ed classroom. So that opened up her classroom for the social emotional learning room if we need to move it over there. So that gave us a little bit of wiggle room on that end of it. But other than that, you know, the two classrooms are still the two classrooms. And like I said, I really apologize. I spent a lot of time on that slide presentation so it would answer all of your questions, and you'd have, I even took pictures of the classrooms with all the desks in it and
The only
that.
classrooms I'm seeing are from the high school. Those are the only pictures that I see.
I shared, it was in slides, so I shared it with you through email. I don't know if you can grab it. I didn't know how to put it in the folder.
It just populated.
All right, so if you can take a minute or two, if you want to look through that and let Stephen do his presentation, and then I'd be happy to answer questions afterwards if you want. It's up to you, Emery, however you want to do it.
Can I actually ask like 2 questions real quick about the East Meadow plan?
It's
Emery?
Yeah.
I was part of the reopening committee and on the high school subcommittee, so I got a lot of great insight from the high school. I actually went myself to the school to see what it looked like with 3 feet apart and 6 feet apart. And one of my biggest questions is, does the high school have the 3 extra potential classrooms? Because when I was there looking at 6 feet, I didn't see that many extra classrooms, because they also needed, of course, to space out and have different spaces for storage and all of those things. So I'd be curious if they had the 3 extra rooms. And one of my biggest concerns is just after hearing that from Beth Perron, that 50% of the staff is potentially uncomfortable or susceptible with being at risk. That to me is a huge thing that I think needs to get really talked about thoroughly. Just because, I mean, if let's say we do have all this space, but if we don't have the teachers in those spaces, obviously that won't work. So that's just something I'm hoping to get some more insight on tonight.
So, Stephanie, if I may jump in. I think broadly, Stephanie and Jen, first of all, I think you are identifying one of those good questions that we will be looking, or we need to look into, whether or not what we are currently thinking will be possible in terms of having all those students in the East Meadow building, plus potentially 3 classrooms in the high school building for 6th grade, whether or not it's possible. Maybe, you know, maybe numbers don't add up one way or the other. That's a good conversation to have. I don't think we're gonna resolve it right now, but that's exactly what we wanted to be able to do. And when we get a chance to look at what Bill posted, you know, it may become a little more clear, or there may be some additional questions, but we're gonna have all that conversation, especially on Monday. And before Monday, we're gonna try to really clarify some of those things, particularly those of you who are in the working groups. Stephanie, the point that you're raising, the second point, is really important, and that's going to be one of the several factors that's going to have to go into our consideration in a way. Currently, what we are doing, based on what we know, based on the requirements, based on, you know, what I call the science and fact, we are creating these designs, the 3 version of that same design, one being in class, the second one is hybrid, the third one fully online. We're just creating these versions of the plan that we need to review, discuss, but we also know that there will be additional factors that need to be fed into that. One of them is what you're talking about. Whether it's level of comfort or risk or all that, we need to really talk and address that. The other thing that I would like to make sure is clear, I heard that there was some confusion about something that we discussed at our last meeting related to homeschooling. Students who, for whatever reason, cannot make it to the school building, whether they have a risk factor or, you know, families for a variety of reasons choose not to send their students into the classroom. If it was misunderstood that there was a suggestion they all, by virtue of that, become homeschooled students, That's not the case. They don't become homeschooling students. They become part of the online version that we have to really consider and see what that means for our plans. So I just want to make sure that we clarify that also. Any other questions for Bill? Audrey, go ahead.
Okay. Couple of things that I wrote down just as I was listening. Hybrid on Wednesdays option, Wednesday being a deep clean, and the kids not being in the building, but they would still be doing online learning at home, correct, that day?
Correct. So it'd be a remote learning day for all.
Okay.
And, you know, exactly what that looks like, you know, is to be determined. But absolutely, it'll be a, you know, a remote learning day for all. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday would be remote for the students that go Thursday, Friday. For the students that attend Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday would be their at home and remote days when they're not in the building.
I also am curious, as far as from what was in the plan, how the cohorts kind of flip-flopped. Sometimes I feel like for planning purposes of families, would it be easier that it was a more consistent schedule versus them having to run to check the calendar, be like, all right, which week is the child in, you know, the flip-flopping?
Yeah, no, that's why we kept it the same. We didn't flip-flop. So cohort A will always be Monday, Tuesday,
okay.
And cohort B will always be Thursday, Friday. Okay. Just like the whatever we do for the early session or second, you know, first run for the buses or second run for the buses would always stay the same. So group A would come in first and leave first, and group B would come in second and leave second.
Okay.
For several reasons, right? Because that would also allow them their appropriate time in the building.
Right. Second question, Google Classroom at one point, I thought I heard you say for all, but is it actually just grade 2 and up and the younger grades are doing something else, or it's Google Classroom with emails for everybody?
Well, so one of the things we've been looking at is a couple districts have used the Google Classroom, or at least Google Slide template for all of their students, right? And all the teachers use the same template, and it listed out the work every day, and it listed out the responsibilities, and it listed out everything. So our hope is, you know, our goal, I should say, is that it's going to be Google Classroom for all. Now, if they supplement that with Zoom, or if they supplement that with you know, ABC, or if they supplement that with something else, right? If they're going to use Class Dojo, for example, or something, then all that's going to be put in there as well. But the idea is going to be that it's going to be, everybody's going to have access to those Google Classrooms, and everybody's going to use the same slide presentation, and parents will be used to seeing it. It's a great template. The teachers will work on that. That's going to be part of what those 12 days of PD will be at the beginning of the year, is developing that and looking at that, and then, you know, just reusing that template every day so that it spells out.
Consistent.
Here's the lesson. Here's my recording of the lesson. Here's your problems to do. Here's the explanation, you know, and here is how you submit your work. Like the last slide one district used every day was, here's how to submit your work. I see you smiling. So that's what that, right? And it makes sense. And what a great tool for families and parents, I think. So that's what we're planning.
Okay, and Emery, quickly, I do have the PowerPoint pulled up, and I do think that it's pertinent for us to try to present this if at all possible, just as a visual of what it's going to look like. I'm under attack for families to see. I'm going to have to move locations. I don't know if you have yours opened or not.
Yes, I have. I just saw it since you mentioned it. If we can ask Alex. Oh, Alex, do we have share capability?
You should.
Yes, you do.
So let's just do that. Let me know if you can see.
Yep, we can see it.
All right. So which one, do you want me to go through the slides, or do you want me to just, I think I hadn't seen it before, but as far as, you know, a summary, 6 feet apart, old desks, and our teachers will have 8 to 10 feet from them. I think that was mentioned. This is the classroom distribution that you guys were talking about.
So this shows grade 5 with only 2 classrooms with 27 and 28. It really needs to be 3
It's gonna need
Well, that's
classrooms.
because, right, but that's because that's as it is now, right? So I didn't make any of the changes until we get from you folks the directive that that's what we're going to do. So as of
Right.
now, that's where it's at.
So what I'm missing then is there no pre-K? Because pre-K is 2 classrooms and their spacing might be different. So they had 2 classrooms and those 2 classrooms I don't see counted on there, but they might need 3 or more classrooms if they're spread out. So that's where it's not, that's why the math is not making sense to me.
I think it'd
They
be good
won't
to
need-
see it with another graph, like another column saying how many classrooms would be needed with the 20 per classroom.
They won't need 3 classrooms because they're split morning session and afternoon session. And the number of students that we have is manageable with what we have in place for pre-K.
My concern is, Bill, you had just said that you had 5 students just move into town. So also adding some room for some growth, like grade 2 at 69 would definitely be more than 3 classrooms. So they would actually need 4. Was that reflective if grade 6 moved to the high school, that there would be 4 rooms for grade 2?
But it also depends on how many families choose to online.
Correct. It's still 70 almost.
But it seems like this is one of the questions, and great question. So we're going to be able to look at this and see whether or not it's gonna align with the thinking at the end. But what I'm hearing is that Bill, you're saying we're going to be able to have, if all the students were to choose to come back to their classrooms, we're going to be able to have them in the buildings, pre-K through 5 in the East Meadow building, with desks 6 feet apart and being 8 to 10 feet from their teachers, and also 3 classrooms in the junior senior high building for the 6th grade.
That is the recommendation, right? So that's where we're at, and that is down in next steps as the last slide in this plan, as next steps and thoughts as we move forward.
Is it one of the slides here?
Yeah, it should be the last one.
Okay. Right here. Okay. So that's the recommendation. If I may just quickly summarize what I think I heard, that's the recommendation. Still, we may have some room to just add the numbers and see how it's going to be possible, but that is the recommendation that you are seeing on the screen.
And I just add for clarification though, that this wasn't necessarily the entire committee's recommendation. I felt like being on the reopening committee, it was more of 2 fantastic focus groups. So just because these are the plans, just because my name is attached to it, I'm going to be very honest that I'm not fully supportive of this plan.
I think he means this is the recommendation of what would have to happen.
Correct. Sorry. Yes.
Yes.
Emery, if you could go back to the photos, please, because for me,
which
this is
one? All of
what
them?
hits home. Well, in general, that's what hits home for me. I want.
Okay. So let's just go through the photos a little bit and see what it is. This is the 1st grade picture.
Right.
And
So
Bill, these are showing us how the desks would look if based on what you shared, the 6 feet apart and all that, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
So that is 6 feet spaced out, and I tried to get one from each grade level so that everybody could see that it's across the board.
Okay.
And I know, there's a lot of talk about, again, what's best, right? Emery, you said, like, there's different feelings. So for some people, they're going to look at this and they're going to say, oh, wow, that's terrific. They can breathe a sigh of relief and they can say, oh, so my student can go back to school and they're going to be 6 feet apart. They're going to have their masks. And then there's going to be other people that say, oh my gosh, I'm looking at this and what a different school is now, and school's not the same. And, and I think it's important for us all to remember that, unfortunately, life's not the same. When we go to a restaurant now, or when we go anywhere, it doesn't look the same. So we're all just trying to, adapt, as you said, Emery, to something that's, comes along once every 100 years, and,
I mean,
and
I'd
just try
love
to
to
make
see
do what we can.
what the plan is in a kindergarten classroom. I mean, as far as tables and chairs, one, but also two, keeping in mind that that teacher space is where the teacher is supposed to stay. They are not walking over, as Ms. Perron fully brought out, to that student that's all the way in the back of that to help them, guide them through a problem that they're having on a particular day. That is their spot, that far away from the teacher. That's huge.
Also,
Well, it's also considering it's even further, I've had parents say to me, that's better than having them at home and having the teacher try to do it over the computer, right? So
And I feel like we also are trying to remember and tell parents too, that if we have to go fully hybrid or fully remote again this year, the plan is that it's not going to be as disconnected as it was this spring.
Right, but it's not going to be anywhere near. I mean, I can speak personally about my 15-year-old who is a great student, a solid straight A student, and had a miserable time altogether. And a lot of people I talk to say the same thing. So I think it's important that we just try to consider everybody's point of view and everything as we're doing this, and also what we're being directed to do, right, by the governor and by the commissioner of education and by the school committee. And I think, we have to consider what we're being told, and we have to trust the process. If we're being told to try to get them back into the buildings, then I think we have to do our best to conform to that. That's just, that's where I'm working from right now. And that's what I think our directive is from you.
So I don't see any pictures of the pre-K classrooms. And Emery, if you could go back to the grade 3 classroom for a moment. So I don't understand, and this is just me, I'm tired. So the 8 feet of teacher space along the front of the room, but the blue floor is 6.5 feet. So that looks like it's.
So the blue floor is 6.5 feet. The desk is 22 inches. And then the student is sitting behind the desk. So you take the 6.5 feet, add to it the 2 feet for the desk, and then the student sitting behind that, you've got your distance between the teacher and the student.
No laying your head down in the front row.
So
were there supposed to be pictures of the pre-K rooms? And I'm just not seeing them. Did you go by them already?
There's no pre-K or K at this point. Nope, there's no pictures of K or pre-K.
Okay.
They're going to be a little different, and we can add those in there, moving from the other classrooms that we're going to add into the pre-K and K rooms to have it so the students are distanced out. And then another option we're looking at is in areas where students might be sitting like across the table from each other, putting vinyl or plexiglass dividers in the middle of the table, like the cafeteria picture shows, that we would have a divider down the middle and students can sit on each side of it, is one of the possibilities.
I have 2 quick questions. Just looking at this, are we the fire code? It looked like there were desks that are like right in front of the doorways to the other classrooms. I thought like that whole row had to be cleared for emergencies. And then also I had a question really for Megan to maybe give some insight for inclusion in these rooms. How would we work that in if a student has a one-to-one with that one-to-one? Is that an additional 6 feet? You have this child's desk, and then do we need another clearance of 6 feet for another teacher to come in? I'm just curious. I couldn't find any guidance on that. I don't know if it's too specific, but.
Right, so if they're directly working with a particular student, high needs student, they are where, they're going to be within 6 feet of that student. And so for the purposes of like creating the rooms, then in those cases, they would take up one of the spots of a student desk, because we would want to give the 6 feet, and obviously they're adults. So, and they're not going to be sitting per se, but they'll be in close proximity to the student.
Right, okay, so that was more of a question. I just want to make sure that this is very transparent as an inclusive model to everyone and everyone's needs. That was.
So in that case, it would be less students than 20.
Right.
Right, that was my question.
Correct. It would be 19, it depends on how many kids and how many bodies, and we don't know, you could have a kid move in who requires a one-on-one the first day of school, and so we have to make adjustments and be flexible in in this situation. We're not going to know, there's so many what ifs, we're not going to know them all until we start working through each kid's plan and how it affects the classroom as a whole. So
are the numbers reflective for, like, if we have in the numbers that were established that Bill put in that slide, which was very helpful, thanks Bill, if there are paras that are supposed to be in those rooms now, then that will, I mean, if there are any paras in any of the 2nd or 4th grade classrooms that are needed, we are over our limits almost immediately, and then that means another classroom. And I know in some of the grades, just from personal interaction, there is more than one student in a class that requires a para, and maybe that's different. Maybe those students have moved out or have changed, whatever. But if there's more than one student and there's more than one para in a class, then it's not 19, it becomes 18 if there's 2, or it becomes 17 if there's 3, right? So all of that should be figured in this plan. And I, that would be something that I would like to see for our town hall portion, so that we can actually see what accurate class size would be, because we can't say it's going to be the full size with the inclusion, right? Is that what I'm understanding?
So, Jen, until we know how many children are coming back, we won't be able to do that figuring yet. If the committee decides that we're doing in person, then everyone's back, and then that's when we've got to figure out, are every child coming back, or are we going to have some 2nd graders that aren't coming? So yeah, there is still a lot of work to be done, but I don't think we'd be able to tell you. We would be able to tell you how many paraprofessionals per grade.
But I think even just for the planning purposes, assuming we go back to in-person learning, we know what those numbers are right now. We know who has plans in our existing population. We know how many paras we have staffed in our building. We know that those paras are now assigned to one student. From what I'm reading, they're not going to be able to be bouncing from student to student. So we know that information. So that should be part of the plan, because regardless of what we choose, it still needs to be planned for appropriately. And maybe I'm being a hard ass and I apologize, but it feels like we need to have all of the information so that we actually know, and so that the teachers actually know what the size of their class looks like. And I want the teachers to feel like they are being taken into consideration, and all of those things are there for them, because if they have a number of students on plans, they know that there's more people in that class, right? So I feel like we know that information now. It should be part of the plan going forward, so that we know how many rooms we actually have, because we're dangerously close on those. We're already over on some of these with 23. That's more than 20. That's more than what we say we can fit in a room. But now if there's any paras in any of those rooms of the 23, that's what I'm saying. Like, we have that information right now. That should be taken into consideration. That should be part of our plan as we know it. And then if people don't come back and things are adjusted, then we can adjust down or adjust up. But right now we need a baseline, right? Of where
So
we're
right now, Jen, I can answer that right now. So right now, if you look at the numbers, grade 2 is the only one that is in that danger. Part of the thought of this is, if there's a student that needs support, that 10 foot of teacher space along the front of the room allows for a para to be in. You figure those rooms are close to 30 feet long. So if the teacher had a 20 by 8 foot space in the front of the room, and the para had a 10 by 8 foot space on the other side of the room to work with the student that's at the front desk there, or 2 students at the front desk there, that would work. The other thing would be shifting those desks maybe forward so that we could do that. The only classroom that would be a problem in at this point is grade 1, because they're 20, 20, 20. The other grade levels are 17, 17, 18, 17, 17, 16. And then when we move grade 5 out, we're down to the same, to similar numbers there. And then grade 6, if we go to the 3 classrooms as well, you're below 20 there as well. So it affords you that space cushion that you're talking about if we need it. So yeah, we have thought about that. Megan and I have been talking about that. We've been looking at that, and also looking at how those services are going to be provided to these students anyway, because a lot of them have pullout services. So how are we going to accommodate those pullout services when we're being asked to keep those students in the classroom as much as possible? So there's a lot of things to consider. You're absolutely right. And I don't think, you know, if anything, you're just like Emery has said, you're asking the right questions, and this is the time to do it. So, you know, we want to make sure that we're getting these points out, and that whatever you're thinking, you're asking, so that we can look at that. But at this point, the plan would be, if we have to go with the 4 classrooms for 2nd grade, that would get us well down below and offer us the space that we need for that. And in the other classrooms where they're 17, 17, and 16, or 17, 17, and 18, we can take 2 and 3 desks out of those classrooms and make bigger areas for those to work. Does that make sense?
Oh, Bill, you just said when we move grade 5 out, is grade 5 and 6 looking to move to the high school?
No, sorry, grade 6. When grade 5 goes down to 3 classrooms.
Okay, sorry, trying to not have a small heart attack here, trying to look it up.
No, so guys, if I may, I think the questions made it plenty clear that we have some reconciliation to do. Jen, I really appreciate the question about having the full scenarios, if there will be some paras in some of the classrooms, if there will be additional people at any time, what that means, whether or not it's making the size large or larger than we can accommodate. Absolutely, those are great questions that hopefully by Monday we can find some answers to. And as we get to the town hall or the public forum, we can provide some more detail around that. But I really think that these are the types of questions that we're going to need to come up with as we go through the plan. And when it is posted for the public on Friday, I hope that those who will come to the public forum will also have similar questions that we can entertain.
And I guess one thing I'll say further, Jen, the point that you brought up, we could do a second slide with enrollment of what the classroom sizes would be with the breakouts, right? Like we could add a slide in there that would show, if we were to move grade 6, what that would look like. And I don't know if that would help.
Yeah, I think it probably would help.
This current year, or 2021's kindergarten group, is the 51 kids, or are these last year's numbers?
Nope, that's this coming year.
That's this coming year.
So this is truly as of today, the enrollment that we know? Or
Truly as of
yesterday?
And
truly
we did,
as of, yep.
did we end up adding in school choice kids at this point, or no? I'll go there.
Not to those grade levels that we said we weren't going to allow school choice in.
But we did for other grades that we did say we would add them in for.
I don't think we've had anybody. I'm trying to think. I think the only students that we've added so far have been students that are enrolled with us, like in the district.
Okay. Because the other sticking point for me, and again, with my background, is in that 1st grade classroom, and we didn't see a visual of what kindergarten would look like. These kids are, other than outside learning time is potential, correct, on a schedule, but they are sitting in those seats 6 feet apart.
Well, one of the things that it was funny, because Mrs. LaPointe was in the school the last couple of days working in her classroom, and one of the things we talked about was that if they wanted to do a movement break during the day, if every student stood up to the left of their desk, right? That would give that 6-foot buffer to everybody around. And like that would allow them the chance to do their noodle breaks that they do with the movement on the board and things like that. So, you know, we just happened to talk about that when we were in the room, and she was optimistic about the space that was there and that it allowed her to do something like that.
I'm thinking more instructional, like no small group learning.
Right.
Correct?
Well, correct. I mean, if we're keeping them 6 feet apart, then we
Right.
can't do small group learning.
Well, I mean, you could do small group in the courtyard, 6 feet
Correct.
apart, if you were there with the small group, and you sit them on
And
the
they could-
stumps and
They could still
And
turn
in
and
that
talk.
scenario, I mean, I feel like when you have other teachers that are maybe taking a group of kids and bringing them out to be able to still do a small group, but you know, are we getting those highs pushed too? So just.
So let's just keep in mind that every scenario, every model that we go with will have some pros and cons. I mean,
Right.
you know, the small groups in an online setting is not really the easiest thing, or, you know, the most comfortable setting either. So I really appreciate all these questions and the, you know, thoughtful contributions, because some of these things, some of us may not have thought about at all. So it is really generating more questions. Again, I hope that once we have some of these included and the plan is in better shape, still as a draft on Friday, when we share with everyone, we're going to have a lot more questions as much as clarity around it.
One last thing, and I'm going to take Steve Sullivan's tagline that he used. The entire reopening committee is, we're going to leave this with more questions than answers. I loved that, and it's so true. Even after all those meetings, there's still, you know, just pages of questions. My only thing specifically is there any guidance for specials at East Meadow? Art, library, music, and gym, because I haven't seen anything on those things yet, or yeah.
So the plan's going to be that the teachers, I think.
Bill, I don't know if you saw that, but those just came out from the Department of Education. I think I put them in the shared folder. So yeah, we'll be working those into the plan. Bill, you can talk about how you're going to do it, but those just came out.
Yeah, no, real quick. We did put in the plan that it would start out with the teachers going to the classrooms at the beginning, the specials teachers. You know, the specials are part of the teacher negotiations and teacher contracts. That gives the teachers their prep time. So we need to find some way to find those preps and continue those preps if we weren't going to do specials. I think specials are important anyway. We still, I mean, I would hate to have to take away music and art and gym and everything else. So the guidance that we have from DESE says that they can still participate in the gymnasium. And there's certain guidelines as to what equipment can be used and can't be used and that sort of thing. So we're looking at that. And of course, getting them outside. So PE would take place outside of the classroom. And for the beginning, the plan is that the other teachers would visit the classrooms and work in the classrooms until the students are able to move to the specials rooms. We're looking at how we could get table dividers for the art room, maybe, so that the students could be divided by that plexiglass or that vinyl protection and still go to art and things like that. But they will still be getting specials from the beginning of the year. It'll just be in their classroom for the,
Carol,
for the
do you know
beginning
where I'm going
until
with
we.
that? Sorry, Bill, but I already posed the question to Carol too, is.
Audrey, one
teachers-
second. Just let's make sure that Bill finished what he was saying.
Yep. Thank you, Emery. Nope,
Okay.
that's fine.
All right. Audrey, go ahead.
My apologies, though.
No.
But I had mentioned to Carol too, is all teachers are sitting here going, how am I supposed to prep if everything's in my room that I need to prep and the kids are in the room and I can't navigate around? So that's another big concern. I know that's going to be on the teacher end. So.
Absolutely. And again, I think, as an administrator's hat, and the answer to that would be, well, we're finding a way to get you your prep. You can log in from your laptop anywhere in the building or outside the building to do what you need to do, right? So again, I think it comes down to, is it easier to prep, to have a prep and to be able to do that? Or do we negotiate and have to look at what we would do if teachers didn't have preps, as opposed to doing it this way? So as Emery said, there's going to be pros and cons, and there's going to be questions, and there's going to be a lot to do with it. So thank you.
Any other questions? Stephanie, you mentioned something important, I think, based on one of the pictures, whether or not it was in violation of certain codes and all that. I think it is my understanding, and if I'm completely off, I know that Carol and Bill would correct me. On many of the things that are different related to the design, the distancing, to fire exits and all that, my understanding is that there will be a walkthrough anyway with BOH and the building inspector to make sure that everything is really now in compliance with where everything should be and how things should function. So we will, I think we do that before we open schools anyway. The building inspector comes in and checks a lot of things, the smoke detectors to everything else. So that is my understanding. If I'm wrong, please correct me, Carol or Bill.
You're absolutely right, Emery. It happens on a normal year. So I can only imagine this year it's going to be even bigger, right? That we're going to have even more input and more walkthroughs.
Cool. Thank you. Any more questions? All right. This actually gave us a lot of good questions. I jotted down several. I'm sure all of you have many. We should probably try to keep these in a central repository, or at least share with Carol or Bill, to make sure that those sections where we have questions can be addressed in the final draft, or the draft that's going to be presented to DESE. So we are, we're all on the same page. But thank you all for those questions. Anything else from the school committee or Bill, Carol, Megan? All good? All right, thank you all very much. So doesn't mean we cannot ask more questions if you have any later on, but let's just move to junior, senior high school, and let's turn it to Stephen.
Hey everybody, how are you tonight?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you. I want to start by reiterating something Emery and Carol both said. Just really appreciate the committee at the junior senior high school. I think, yeah, we have been upwards of 12 or 14 hours just in-person meetings in the past 2.5 weeks or so. So like the commitment from that group has been incredible. I really feel like it's been a collaborative effort that we've built this plan from the ground up. There's been different iterations of it. I think if anyone checked it over the weekend and then checked it again today, you might be surprised that there were some pretty dramatic changes in the past couple of days. So, I even listening to the questions posed to Bill, I appreciate that. I think that's what we need to have. I think that's how we're going to grow and develop a plan that makes sense for everybody. And I think also working with the mindset that, there is no perfect plan. There is no ideal plan. If there was, then every school and every district would just be using that. And the other kind of motto or mantra our group has been working from, if you're not okay in a world where there's more questions than answers, this is going to be incredibly challenging for you, because there's going to be more questions and answers when I'm done, and there's going to be more questions and answers in a week and in 2 weeks. And that's just kind of like something that we've all kind of had to accept. So we're going to do our best to answer them and think about our students and staff and how we can create teaching and learning environment in the safest, most effective way possible. And I think that's the kind of the vision that we've had as a group, and we've really focused on these 3 plans. We've dipped our toes a little bit into a grading policy. We've talked a little bit about attendance, but we haven't gone too far into some things because Desi is talking about providing some guidance, and it isn't out yet on attendance. So again, it's similar to some of the things we've worked hard, and then Friday they come out with classes for special considerations, and you go back to it and have to change it. And it's just, to use a cliche term at this point, the new normal. So I guess I'll start with the feasibility information. I shared it with the school committee. It should be in the folder, but if it wasn't, I emailed it out a little bit ago. I got a little nervous when you didn't have Bill's slides. So the benefit of going second, I suppose. So really in terms of...
can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
So the feasibility study, I mean, there's a lot of information, so I tried to condense it a bit. But really, I think one of the most significant changes we will be making is moving from our 7-day semester schedule. So you have 7 classes, and at the semester, sometimes things change. So you might go from a phys ed class to a health class or to another half-year course at mid-year. We're going to transition this year to a block schedule. In our face-to-face, in our in-person model, it would be a day 1, day 2 schedule. So students would have 4 classes on day 1, and teachers would teach 3 classes on day 1. And on day 2, students would have 4 classes and teachers would teach 3 classes. So it would rotate every day. We've talked a little bit about just having an odd even model. And of course, with some exceptions, you'd have to go through the year and make sure that that's balanced. But an odd even model would be a place to start. In the hybrid model and the remote model, we have discussed transitioning from a day 1, day 2 model to a week 1, week 2 model, which would allow some more consistency and continuity for teachers. And I think for teachers and students, you're not worrying about 6 for teachers or 8 classes for students. You're worried about the 3 classes you're teaching or the 4 classes you're taking. And we've built in some things into our expectations. I think if you look at our plan, we have for each one of our plans, teachers will, counselors will, social workers will, kind of a way to outline our expectations. So there's some language built in there that we felt was important, because I think in talking through with our group a little bit, with our committee, is we felt like the structure is what's most important. We need to have more structure than we had in the spring. And I think parents, school committee members, teachers, myself, if we think that remote learning is going to look the same this fall or next spring or this winter as it did in the spring, I think people will be sorely mistaken, because it needs to be better. It needs to be, and I think Granby did a fantastic job. This isn't a knock on the teachers. This isn't a knock on students or parents. We did the absolute best that we could with what we had. But now we have an opportunity to create a more robust product. Sorry, I have little interruptions in the back. So a more robust model for remote learning or hybrid learning. So we've kind of worked under that premise that we need more structure to that. And I think you might have questions, but I'm happy to just discuss more as we go through each plan. So the other thing, I talked about that. I've also included in the feasibility each classroom that we have and how many students we can fit at at 3 feet, and how many students we can fit at 6 feet. So I'll throw it out there right now. So it's no surprise to anybody. We know that the school committee's expectation was that we worked with a goal of having 6 feet in all classes. We at the junior senior high school cannot do in-person learning at 6 feet for everyone. There are classes that would need to be 3 feet throughout the day. While students may have 6 of their 8 classes where they're 6 feet, it is not entirely possible. So figure I won't save that piece to the end, but that is something that we're pretty clear on, that we cannot do in person at 6 feet. Down below talks a little bit about our shift in our schedule. So our 2 guidance counselors probably got about, I don't know, 80%, 85% done with our first schedule before I asked them to go back to the drawing board and create a block schedule. So they have been fantastic. They've been working days and nights to try to make the block schedule work. We feel the block schedule, it reduces the number of transition students have, and also helps keep class size down. So we felt that that was really important for logistical reasons. Of course, I think there's some benefits, but there's also some cons to it in terms of teaching and learning. So they've been working on that. So we're not quite done with the schedule, but what we have now as of today, we're scheduling out 224 sections of classes currently. Right now we have 10 classes, which is 4%, have more than 18 students. As you can see in our model above, we don't have any classrooms, any traditional classrooms that would allow for 18 students even at 3 feet or at 6 feet apart. So in those cases, we would have to consider the library, the cafeteria, the gym, the band room, some of our bigger non-traditional teaching spaces. We have 57 classes, 25% currently have 18 students. So 29% of our classes right now have 18 or more students. So I think that just supports the idea that we can't be fully in person at 6 feet. The next bullet just talks about those non-traditional spaces. 80 classes, 36% of our classes right now have 12 or fewer students. This excludes the 20 classes, 9%, that currently have 0 students assigned. So the reason that some students would have 0 is there's always conflicts in schedules. It's a shuffle. It always seems like the master schedule is like 97% done because there's always shifts and tweaks and conflicts that have to be addressed. And most of those classes are middle school electives that students get hand scheduled into, and that's part of the process that we're going through, but just kind of where it stands now. That 36% also accounts for our ELL classes or special ed classes, which typically are smaller and in a more traditional sense anyway. So, it's good to have 36% there, but I think in some ways, right, like the numbers can always lead you in one direction or another. So I want to try to be as transparent as possible with that. 12 of our 27 traditional classroom spaces can accommodate up to 12 students at 6 feet apart, if you see the chart above. And then it varies, right? There's not much uniformity in the classroom design that we have. Sometimes it's a closet in a room that juts out. Sometimes it's multiple doors. Sometimes it's built-in tables that prevent us from just saying that every class is the same. Teachers have been notified that in an effort to maximize classroom space, they will only be allowed to have a teacher desk, a small file cabinet, and 1 2-door cabinet, with some exceptions. Of course, if they need a projector, an overhead document camera, things like that for teaching purposes, those things would be available. But again, we're trying to maximize the space that we have because we're already tight, as you can see. And with that said, you'll see there's some storage identified on the 2nd floor, but we don't have any storage identified on the 1st floor yet. Because teachers, not are they losing some tables and things like that, but they might be losing some instructional materials or texts that aren't used every day, but they do use throughout the year. So they're going to need a place where they can store them and access them freely. So that is something else that we're working on. That's it in regards to the feasibility study. The summaries for our plan, I guess I've already previewed the in-person plan a little bit, so I can start there, and then I'm happy to talk in more detail. I think really if you look at our plan and look at, of course, there's a narrative, but the expectations, I think that really helps spell out kind of some of the structure and changes that we're expecting in any of the models that we discuss. But in summary, the in-person plan, in all models, we'll have a 4x4 block schedule with 4 classes. The in-person model, classes will meet each day on an A-B schedule. Teachers would teach 6 classes. We anticipate some classes, like I said, being able to accommodate 6 feet of spacing for students, but expect there will be some classes that will only allow for less than 6 feet, 3 feet, 3 to 6 feet, I should say. In those situations, dividers could be used to separate students. Something we've explored a little bit. We're looking more at DESE's guidance because it just seems like that piece is a little unclear on their end. Or maybe we're just missing it because we are getting inundated with information. All instructional staff would have a 6 feet space from the front of the room. But again, I think Mr. Racine, who's on our committee, talked about like really that's going from the floor, the front of the wall to like the front of that seat. So it's a shade over 6 feet, but it's like if the teacher's a foot off the wall, that even minimizes the space that we have a little bit more. And then we would continue to follow all safety protocols in any of the models. Our hybrid, actually, I'm going to go to our remote plan next. So our remote plan is that all students would interact with teachers and peers virtually, with the exception that special populations would continue to receive some of their education and services in person to the extent possible and based on their individual plans. Remote learning will take place at regularly scheduled, clearly communicated times and consist of a combination of independent work, virtual group work, small and whole group synchronous learning activities, and support from students assigned classroom teachers. Students will have 4 classes in week 1 and 4 different classes in week 2. We would follow our traditional school day beginning at 7:30 and ending at 1:58 in our remote learning and our hybrid plan. That provides some of that structure that I alluded to before. And I think the lack of structure, while we try to give the flexibility in the spring, I think that it also turned into a lack of structure where people were feeling like they had to respond to emails and questions and things like that at all hours of the day and night. So we feel like this plan will allow us to have some more structure and let people figure out their own work and family schedules with some more consistency. The hybrid learning plan is very, very similar to the remote learning plan. Most students will engage in coursework remotely, but there will be opportunities for in-person instruction and support. In all 3 models, there will be an expectation that Google Classroom is the primary platform in which students assign and submit work. It would look a little bit different in person, but again, there's a lot of variables here. So making sure that Google Classroom is utilized effectively and consistently is important to all 3 plans. There will be opportunities for synchronous learning and support in person in the hybrid plan. We would utilize a week 1, week 2 model, which means, again, students would have 4 classes 1 week. And we even put in the plan, like the expectation is that, you know, in your week 1, if you're working in a hybrid or remote, your assignments are all due within that week. So you're focused on those 4 classes. Of course, there's opportunities where you might have a longer term assignment, a paper, a project, a longer term assignment or a project, but you know, teachers, if they communicate that clearly to students and parents about when grades can be expected, and those things aren't due, for example, you know, the next Monday that you're back, you know, I think we can manage that. But really, a majority of assignments would be due within that week. It's about allowing students to focus a little bit more on the 4 classes they're responsible for during that week, and not feel like I have 8 things that I'm trying to juggle. All students in the hybrid plan would be placed into cohort A or B, likely, but alphabetically. I don't know if Bill mentioned it, but I think that's been part of the conversation. So there could be some continuity between the 2 schools should students need to be in. By last name, we know there's some exceptions there, and we'd have to look at some individual cases, of course, but for this purpose, they would be placed into cohort A or B, even though most of them would engage in remote learning a majority of the time. Special populations would be expected to receive in-person instruction and support. And students who are struggling with remote, this is kind of the difference for remote and hybrid, students who are struggling with remote learning and those students whose parents insist on in-person support would attend classes up to 2 days per week with their assigned cohort. Students who are in person would still be responsible for completing and submitting work through Google Classroom, but would have the guidance of their teachers, social workers, and counselors to support all their needs and equip them with strategies that can then be used when they are working remotely. And again, in the hybrid model, we would follow our traditional school day, 7:30 a.m. to 1:58 p.m. In the hybrid learning plan. So those are really summaries. I'm happy to go into a little bit more detail if people want on some of the expectations. I did touch on things kind of throughout, but if you switch, I don't know, Emery, if you're still displaying your screen. I'm not seeing it, but
No, I'm not. What would you like me to show?
If you wanted to go to the draft junior, senior high school plan.
I think I was there. Let me just go back to it.
And if you start right at the remote learning, again, as Carol mentioned at the beginning, the remote learning plan is really designed to be when we as a district or as a school are in remote learning. This is not for, you know, a student who has to quarantine. This is not for a student who chooses remote. We're going to need a separate plan for that. We've talked about some options, but this is really when we're all in remote learning. And down below, you'll see kind of an example. So week 1, students would have their A, B, C, and D block. And then week 2, they would have E, F, G, H. If you scroll down a little bit to the teacher's will, again, communication is going to be critical in any remote or hybrid learning environment. Making sure documented services and accommodations are that students have access to, that all students have access to, are in place. We've discussed, our team has discussed posting assignments to the Google Classroom for that week by Monday. So it can be part of an ongoing discussion. So some students might get ahead, some students might fall behind, but you know, there's kind of an expectation there, which could be challenging in some places, but I think also manageable. This next bullet here, the conduct synchronous learning. I think that's one of the biggest changes that people would see. Is the expectation right now is we would expect teachers to conduct, and we've also talked, our team is like, we're really talking about building a floor, and there's a lot of room between the floor and the ceiling. So this is like the minimal expectation in some ways. So conduct synchronous learning sessions for a minimum of 60 minutes per class, 5 days a week during their scheduled class time. So if you have an A period class, you're on for at least 60 minutes, 5 days a week during that. That does not mean we want 60 minutes of lecture 60 minutes of direct instruction. There can be supervision of student work. You can use breakout groups. You can have group discussions. You can have student presentations, create content, apply their learning. Like this is really like this availability between student and teacher. So we're not saying like, oh, I have this question, I'm going to email it, and the teacher may or may not get back to me in the next 5 minutes or the next 24 hours. So like this is like there's availability right then and there. It also prevents us from, you know, the science teacher and the math teacher scheduling a session at the same time. And then like students having to choose which one they attend. On top of the synchronous learning, staff being available for weekly office hours on their department's assigned day. We'll have a schedule to follow from 2 to 3 p.m. So there would be, and it's similar to what teachers would do in a regular year in person, that they're available for an office hours. Again, we would just try to provide some structure to that. So again, it's not your math teacher and your English teacher have it on the same day, so you have to choose which one to go to. You could go to them all throughout the course of the week. Providing feedback, recording live sessions. So recording live sessions, I think some teachers might cause them some pause, but I think the benefit of that is, again, in an in-person setting, if we had to pull student for an IEP meeting, or we had to pull student, they had to go to a dentist, then the teacher is kind of in a position where they're reteaching to that individual. This way the student can then access that video. If it's a student with an IEP or even a 504 in some cases, they might have support from a paraprofessional. The paraprofessional can then watch the video. So again, everyone's on the same page without the teacher having to teach it all over again. Again, trying to keep that structure in place so that you know, people are feeling like it's as much of a normal day, even if you're working remotely, as possible. I talked about the assigning the due dates within that week. Updating PLUS Portal weekly, so it would probably be on the off week. So if you're teaching A, B, C, D in week 1, you're probably posting A, B, C, D grades in week 2 and vice versa. So again, there's this constant communication. There's these updates that are happening throughout, and everybody's kind of on the same page. There should be no surprises for parents that I thought my kid was submitting all these assignments, and now we're 2 days before the quarter closes and they're missing 15 things. Record student attendance. Attendance would be taken as it would be in school, but again, by recording those sessions, we offer a student opportunity to say, if you did have that dentist appointment, communicate that to the teacher, let them know, go back, make up the class, make sure the teacher's aware, and then the teacher would still be able to mark that student present because they've done the work. Provides contact information similar to like an open house video we've talked about. Again, we're going to have 12 days on the front end to get a lot of training in some of these Google Classroom things that we're talking about, in the portal, in posting things, in creating video content for the classrooms, things like that. So we also have sections for the counselors, social workers, students, and parents. So again, like trying to be really clear on the expectations and being clear about our structures. And I don't want to read through everything, but I also don't want to miss things that people might have questions about. So I guess I'm torn a little bit about if you want me to continue going through. I guess the hybrid and the remote look very similar in terms of expectations for everyone, because we're expecting everything's on Google Classroom. There's clear communication, there's attendance being taken, there's synchronous learning, you know, and Allie is great for me because she plays devil's advocate and often, and she'll say that, you know, our students aren't waking up until 10 o'clock. And, you know, my response to that was like, yeah, that might be the case, but that's because we didn't have clear structures. That wasn't our expectation last year, and we're going to shift our expectations, and we need to communicate that so those students would be getting up like a regular school day to get to their A period class. The difference being they don't have to wake up at 6:30. They could wake up at 7:25 and just turn on their computer. So things like that, like the structure was really important to our group. I heard that loud and clear from teachers and parents. So we really try to be really clear on our structures.
Stephen, do you mind if I jump in?
Of course.
Regardless of which of these models we decide to go with for the high school, are you saying that we're going to switch to a block schedule? Is that the first thing that we should understand? Or is there a case where we may stick to what we are currently doing or we were doing before?
No, we're going to go to the block schedule
Okay.
regardless. I think in person, I think there's some pros and cons to it. Sorry. In the meantime, we've also had a baby. So on top of all this, so that's just like a 2.5-week-old chiming in. But yeah, so I think the structure allows for fewer transitions, and it actually allows for some smaller class sizes because the long block schedule is actually the schedule that's referenced in the teacher contract currently. So I guess there was a shift probably maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, and the language in the contract never changed. So the long block is what is referred to in our contract. And I guess, the benefit from my perspective is that teachers pick up actually another class. So right now they're teaching 5 out of 7. In this model, they're teaching 6 out of 8, which helps keep class size down. And in some cases, it might mean an extra class for teachers, but in a lot of cases, it's meaning that instead of teaching a class of 28, they're teaching 2 classes of the same content at 14.
So I have another question, and I don't know if it came up as we're going through the East Meadow School, but some of these options will really impact the bus schedules. Do we know whether or not, based on the very recently updated DESE guidelines on transportation, you mentioned a start time that is basically the same for everyone. Is that going to work for us if we were to go to an in-class version?
Yeah, I think it's a logistical challenge that we could certainly work through. And I'll be honest, I think the in-person plan is probably the plan we spent the least time on, because the expectation that was given to us from school committee a few weeks ago was to work to 6 feet, and we can't do 6 feet. So if there's a shift in that, I think that's something we'd have to figure out. We also have fewer kids on the bus than East Meadow because a number of students drive. We also anticipate, while it's difficult to predict exactly, more parents are likely going to be driving their students to school if we're in person. We anticipate we could do it, and some buses would need a second run, but we don't believe all 7 of our buses would need a second run.
So thank you for that. And, something just triggered in my mind, and then I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask the rest of the school committee as well if they have any questions.
Of course.
Not to stop you from going through, but maybe we can just touch on some of those key questions, and then we're going to return anyway after the plans are finalized and we have the town hall. But I appreciate that there was a lot of care to make sure that the distance was 6 feet. That was important for the school committee, and I really appreciate in those plans, both of those plans, seeing that 6 feet was a priority. On the elementary school, East Meadow School side, it is kind of easier to see how that affects the planning. On the high school side, it seems like some classes already, have more than would be acceptable because, they don't provide, with the numbers that you have, they don't provide for 6 feet separation. does that mean that in a hybrid model, those classes would always remain remote, or would they alternate as well? So if I'm taking
So
geography
in the hybrid model that we've created is, again, really similar to the remote model, where everything would be most things would be remote, but still some students, the students in the highest need populations, not just special ed and EL, but students who have shown that they struggle with remote learning, would be expected to come in as a cohort.
yeah. So I guess
But
what I'm
even
trying to
when they're in the building,
Yep.
like, so if they're in Mr. Racine's class, the instruction, it would be synchronous, but they would be on their Chromebook getting the remote learning, but Mr. Racine's, a paraprofessional, would be with them so that they could provide additional support. The other thing is we're saying 60 minutes per class, 5 days a week, because, you know, there's still the expectation students are going to have some independent work time and things like that, which would also then provide teachers 20 to 30 minutes if a student was in place where they could work through them on times, because the blocks would be about 85 to 90 minutes.
Yeah. So thank you for that. So let me give you an example. Maybe I'm failing to understand. But let's say I'm taking 4 classes, as you said. I have 4 blocks. On 2 of those, the classrooms are such that the distancing within those classes is allowing 6 feet. So that would allow me to be, as a student, to be in the building. Is that correct? Is that understanding correct?
Yeah, and you're referring to the hybrid model.
Yes. So if
so in the
other
hybrid
2 are
model,
not, what happens?
Yeah, so
I have 4 classes.
In the hybrid model, the idea would be that even if we went full hybrid and split everybody in 2 and everybody was coming in, then we're getting closer to that 12 or fewer in a given class. There might be some outliers, but then you're getting closer to that 6 feet in every class.
Okay, but we're not, when you say closer to, we're still not getting to 6 feet.
Not in every, I think if we use those non-traditional spaces, we would be just about there, but really close. And again, I think some of the teachers have said, you know, like if we're trying to squeeze a desk in, does that make it safer? Is that really what's most effective? So, you know, is there an opportunity to squeeze a desk in, to use a non-traditional space to make it work? Potentially, yes. But, you know, I also think maybe less so in 7th, 8th, even 9th, but 10th, 11th, 12th, you know, I think even before COVID, part of what we were preparing our students for was to be able to engage in remote and virtual learning, because many college courses are that way, even if they're on campus. So that's another skill in a way where they need to take some of that responsibility. But I don't know that I'm totally answering your question, because I don't know that I'm totally understanding it.
What I'm trying to understand is, you know, based on 2 things. One, you said that the hybrid model would really feel like the remote model, or would be very close to the remote model. I don't want to overinterpret that. That's why I'm just going to the example. I'm trying to understand whether, if I happen to take 4 classes and 2 of them, you know, again, just the number of students in those classes allow 6 feet distancing. That's why I can be in the classroom. And 2 other classes where I cannot be in the classroom because we have too many people who signed up for that class. How do we manage that? So am I not going in the classroom where there are too many, but I can go in the classroom where there are fewer? So what do I do if I'm already in the building?
Yeah, so I think that's where the cohort A and cohort B would come into play, because we would schedule them so that we're not running into that. So you're not having that situation where you're in for 2 classes a day, but your other 2 classes are kind of overflowing. But we would then be able to shift those schedules around to say, like, okay, cohort A is coming Monday and Tuesday, but they're kind of full. So cohort B, we're going to start scheduling them.
Okay, awesome. So you get to basically take those, for lack of any other term, the overcrowded classes, you get to take them as you are alternating and you are remote, and then the other classes, you take them when you're in the building.
Yep. Yep. They would all be like, everything would be available remotely. But
Okay.
if you need additional support, you would be able to come in and get additional support. Even if it was, just like, I'm really struggling with this math concept. I need to come in for a couple days, working it out. Again, we'd have to come up with a format that happens, but coming in and saying, okay, maybe I only need to come in for these 2 weeks, 2 days a week. And then I'm going to kind of better understand that because I've gotten some one-to-one support or small group support. And then maybe I'm going to go back to remote until something else comes up. So it allows for more flexibility, which I guess in some ways works against the structure that we've talked about. But, I think the original hybrid plan that we had come up with looked very different. And then after some feedback from teachers and parents this week, we shifted away from that, just based on some concerns and feeling like, if half the class is in Monday, Tuesday, and half the class is in Wednesday or Thursday, Friday, and the teacher's teaching the same thing twice, are we only getting half the curriculum? So doing it all remotely with some in-person support would allow us to move through the curriculum, but also provide support for students who need support, and also extensions for students who might need extensions.
Okay.
So it sounds like the remote, there really isn't a hybrid option. See, it's remote or remote.
No, there's a hybrid. So the hybrid would be like if a parent insists on that student coming in, or a student is not engaging in remote, then they would come in the building. Those options aren't available in the remote plan.
But there still will always be students in the plan regardless. I mean, in the building regardless, right? Just like in East Meadow. So,
Yep.
So that it's either they're all hybrid or they're all remote. Like
If I could, so the way I understood it was that for hybrid, it's your most vulnerable students and the kids that were having trouble being online only. So that is your cohort. It's almost like cohort C, if you will.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And I think we've talked about, and we haven't totally fleshed this out, but we've talked about almost looking at it kind of a combination of how the student support team works and like an IEP team would work, that, you get these students, you hear from the teachers that these students aren't engaging, they're not showing up, they're not making up work. So then you kind of bring a team together to say, have we tried this intervention? Has it been successful? Should we try this intervention? And those intervention would be that the student needs to come in with cohort A, this 2 days a week for X numbers of weeks. And do we see a turnaround in their performance there? Are we equipping them with skills, both while they're in person and with skills that they can then use when they're working remotely?
So my biggest question is, after looking at this and being a part of this even, we're saying that there's not enough room for our high schoolers at 6 feet apart. So to me, it's very hard to hear East Meadow saying, move the 6th grade to the high school when we can't accommodate our high schoolers enough. And I just feel like we really need to zero in on maintaining all students' education as a priority, and just making sure that our high schoolers are also getting, of course, like the best they can have. And I'm just really struggling to see, was there ever a time where these numbers planned on having 6th grade at the high school when the high school remote opening plan was made, I suppose is my question.
Plan to have the 6th grade?
Yes.
No, I've said all along that we could accommodate the 6th grade since whenever we first started talking about it. So that it wasn't part of this plan, but I said if need be, we could make that work, because Bill and Carol explained it to me that it would be 3 classes of 15, and we have 3 classes of 15 that can be 6 feet apart. Our numbers are, I think if we absolutely needed those 3 classes of 15, but our sweet spot at 6 feet is like that 12. So we could give up those 3 classes and then use some of the non-traditional spaces.
So you can give up those rooms, even though we don't have enough room?
Right.
Yeah, so we have enough
making
classrooms. So
Yeah.
we have enough, yeah, it does make plenty of sense. We have enough classrooms, but the classrooms don't have the square footage.
Right.
So
For
even
the
if those,
enrollment, for the enrollment numbers.
Right.
Right.
so even if those classrooms were not really, forget about the 6th grade going to the high school. Even if those classrooms were used for high school students, the size of the rooms will not allow the students to be in those classrooms with 6 feet apart.
It's the square footage,
It's a
yes.
square footage issue. But in the case of an elementary class, because we are, they're going to be in the same class, so long as we know that we can have fewer than a certain number in those classrooms, let's say 3 accommodates all of 6th grade, then that allows for that option. But when you have, classroom 200 is, just make it up, journalism. If you have 18 students, who are going to be in that classroom, we cannot maintain the 6 feet distance. That's
Right, and I think
what I'm
part of it is that the 6th grade K through 6 is really, I think Audrey said it throughout tonight, like they're there for those 6.5 hours in that same spot. We have some transitions, which means this class has 6, then this class has 18, then the next class has 7. So we don't have the one, and I think Jen and Bill talked about it too, saying having 20, 20, and 20, like that's pretty consistent in those classrooms in the elementary, where it's not consistent for us because of the transitions.
Also, Stephen, if you divide the class, you don't have a teacher for the other half of that class.
Right.
Right, and I suppose that's more of where I was thinking. So like to pick on Mr. Racine again, because it's just been our theme of this whole reopening committee. Say Norm has 26 students. We can't work it into our schedule to break his 26 into 2 groups of 13 so that they can have a class, rather they'll be remote, but we can bring in 3 classes of 6th grade. I'm just trying to wrap my brain around this being equal to all of our students, because I feel like we're pushing in East Meadow and pushing our high schoolers aside. And I just want to make sure that that's definitely not the case, so that we've looked at all of those very clearly.
Yeah. So again, it's a square footage issue. It's not the number of classroom spaces issue. It's that we can't get more than 12 or 15 into those classrooms that like is in the
Because of their
chart.
bodies also being bigger.
What's that?
Because of their bodies being bigger, I assume too. Yes, is that?
I don't think that so much. It's really like, again, like the square footage is the square footage. Like we can only fit so many desks at 6 feet apart, regardless of how many classrooms we have. And the 15 is a fixed number. So to Stephanie's point, in some cases, yes, we are reducing Mr. Racine from 26 to 13. But then like you, at some point you get to like an FTE point where teachers can only teach 6. So there's these outlier classes that are going to go above that 15 number or 18 number because we only can offer so many sections of it. I can't think of one off the top of my head. Geometry, I think, has about 60 students. So that's 4 classes because we need to get to that right number. So like that means that's 4 teaching sections that we need from those teachers, and eventually we run out of the FTEs for the teachers, so we can't split up those classes to make them any smaller.
How many do we have, for instance, if we take geometry as an example, and we have 60 students? How many sections do we currently have? How many teachers do we currently have for that?
We would have, I think we have 4 sections split between 2 teachers in geometry, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and I, obviously this is what we said early on, right? That some things will be possible, some things will not, some things we will like, some things we won't. This one surprised me a little bit because I thought there was going to be some opportunity for, say, half the students to be in the building and, do what we just talked about in the East Meadow scenario, and then maybe they are learning remotely while others are coming in. If I'm not misunderstanding, Stephen, and correct me if I'm completely off on this, it sounds like based on the 6 feet requirement, whatever we would call it, except for a smaller subset of students, special education and other need students, we're going to have a remote version regardless under the current scenario.
So under what our committee is proposing, yes, we could do cohort A and cohort B and get every student in the building. We could do that, but the committee did not support that.
That is your reopening committee, the committee
Correct.
that you were working.
Yeah,
You know,
that's actually the plan that if you had looked until Monday evening, that was actually the plan that we had in. And the committee did not support that for a variety of reasons. One being there was some concern that at that point, you're really only getting through half the curriculum. If you're teaching Monday and Tuesday, then you're teaching the same thing with Thursday and Friday. So you end up only getting through half the curriculum rather than having a more robust remote learning plan where, it can be more synchronous than it has been, and moving further through your curriculum and getting deeper into it. So it can be done, but that is not what the committee decided on.
I suppose I'm just having such a hard time imagining okay, English class, let's, go have English in the cafeteria and walk by 3 classrooms of 6th graders. It's just so hard to even imagine.
Yeah, and I think the 6th grade conversation, I think Bill was pretty clear. Like, if that's a non-starter for the committee, then that's a non-starter, and we'll go back and plan based on that. I think what we've come up with for tonight was just our initial thinking. And if that's a non-starter, then I think Bill said then he wouldn't be able to do in-person either. But that would not change us. Then if 6th grade can't move, that doesn't mean we could then do full in-person. So I want to be clear about that piece.
If I can just intervene here for just 1 second, I think the important thing here, Stephen, if I'm not misunderstanding, is your class size. Even if you cut a class in half, you don't have 2 teachers. So the problem is, you have those classrooms, but you don't have the staff to teach those classes. Isn't that what it comes down to?
Right. I think those are the 2 of the things that we've talked about, our square footage and the FTEs. Like, those aren't always going to jive when we want to reduce a class. Like, there's other opportunities to reduce classes, but it would mean having to have another teacher, certainly.
And that's why
more space.
Right. And that's why by sending grade 6 over there, we're sending the staff. And if we have to go to a 3rd teacher, we're looking at ways of maybe pulling somebody from a special area from somewhere. Like Desi's working with us on some recommendations for that as well, I think. But that, you're not required to staff those classrooms. Whereas if you were to use those classrooms to help alleviate your overcrowding, you just don't have the manpower.
Right. And I think, to Stephanie's point, if the class is going to the cafeteria to teach and they have to walk by the 6th grade classes, in the other scenario, they're just walking by 3 empty classes going to the cafeteria because we still don't have the space.
So really, if we want any people to be in the high school besides those that are special needs or whatever, then we have to consider doing 3 feet. I mean, is it 4 feet? Is it what is the number? Because I think honestly, for me at this point, I have a high schooler and I'd rather her be going to school. So I want to know what the actual number is. Is it 3 feet? Is it 2 feet? Is it on top of each other? Like, what are we actually looking at?
So let me just share that on my screen so that we can take a look at it. We may need to do some interpolation as opposed to extra, but let me know when you can see my screen.
It's up.
Okay, so we have the 3 feet version, and Stephen, this is yours, but I'm just jumping. And the 6 feet, I cannot really get to an exact number, but I was thinking the exact question that you had, Jen. What does it mean if this number, if we want to make this number, I don't know. Actually, this one is, well, let me look at it a different way. If we have 10 classes that have more than, that's not a good example because we don't know what exactly that means, but 57 classes with exactly 18 students each, right? That's what this one is saying. So if we were to say, okay, so instead of 15 in those classes, if we have 18, what does that translate to in this chart here? Is that what you're asking, Jen?
Yeah, because
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about too. Yeah.
Because if we can keep some, like you said, some of them we can accommodate for 6 feet apart, but we need to add some of the rooms, like it looks like maybe room 100 and room 101 and room 102 need to be at 18. So maybe it's 4 feet apart or it's 3.5 feet apart or whatever, so that we can get to that, or we keep it at 3 feet apart. If we do that and not every classroom is at 6 feet, does that then allow us to have some students in the building?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. And I think we were working under the guidelines we were given.
No,
And
I
it was
understand that. And
at 6 feet. And, but I think certainly those become options. I know from the past 2 weeks of meeting with the committee, there will be some concerns about that raised, but at 3 feet, if we're going to say 3 feet, I think we could go full in person.
Yeah.
And maybe even at 4 feet. I don't know that, but at 3 feet, I believe we could do full in person.
I feel like the elephant in the room is that during all of these meetings, it was very apparent that staff was very uncomfortable under 6 feet. And that's what we would really have to talk about and think about moving forward.
Personally, I am as well, just for the record, and that's why we said 6 feet. I'm not comfortable with, I mean, I'm not one of those scientists who are going on TV and informing us, but following what I am hearing, I'm personally at this point in time not comfortable with less than 6 feet. So some of the conversations that we had, and Carol helped me out on this one, was whether or not, if, for instance, there was 5 feet in some cases, is there a divider? Is there something to protect and all that? It's a lot of details, a lot of conversations, but since we started with that, I'm personally not comfortable with less than 6 feet, and that was, I think, the common sentiment for the committee, and that's why I'm hearing some of these numbers are the way they are.
Right, and I hear that, but I have to say I'm honestly more comfortable doing the 3 feet, which is within the CDC guidelines, than I am having my students be fully remote.
So to be clear, the CDC guidelines are 6 feet and the World Health Organization is 3 feet. So we've talked about.
The DESI document that I read says 3 to 6 feet.
Yeah, the DESI document says World Health at 3 feet and CDC at 6 feet. We talked about that in our committee, and I think our committee felt like in some ways DESI was allowing people to move the goalposts a little bit to fit whatever they needed to fit. And the committee wasn't fully comfortable with that. But I agree with you. It is 3 feet in that document from World Health Organization.
And Desi, Jen, that's a great question for us to be able to clarify. So Desi kind of took a range based on that, and they said, well, we're hearing 3 to 6 feet would be okay, and you may need to do different things, and you may need to protect in different ways. But I think they were referring to a range because of that. That's a great question.
And I also want to just point out too, in the hybrid model, to Jen's point, if Jen wants her children to go to school, she would be able to have her children go to school in our hybrid model.
Exactly what I was going to say. Exactly.
Yep. And that's the flexibility of that plan.
So even though based on this conversation, it may seem like we will only have our special education students and those students in need in the building, it's possible, Jen, that upon request, we may have a lot more students in the high school, in the building.
Yeah, I think I think the way that it reads, I don't have it right in front of me. I'm happy to find it, but I think it says, you know, students who are disengaged, but also any parent who insists on in-person instruction and support. So we would be able to do that too. And I think, you know, that's just another way to kind of keep the numbers manageable, and likely keep us to 6 feet. There is a scenario even within that we might have to talk about getting to 5 feet if we get a certain number of students. But we wouldn't know that until we're able to get out and survey parents about who would be comfortable with that.
So what would that mean for Mr. Racine? If he has, you know, based on this conversation, he was thinking that, hey, you know what, I'm doing remote. And suddenly we have folks who would like to be in his classroom. So he had 20 people signed up. 10 of them say, I would like to be in the classroom. 10 of them say, I would like to remain remote. How do we reconcile that?
Yeah, so all the work would still be assigned and submitted through Google Classroom, but in-person support would be able to be provided there. So every student will have their one-to-one devices with them so that they would get additional instruction and or support based on having to have their group discussions would just happen within that classroom. And then while other group discussions could be happening in breakout sessions in the remote environment.
Would they have synchronous time with their teacher, or would that be, hey, you know, the teacher's already doing, you know, live version of this class, and he cannot or she cannot do the synchronous online education? How does that work?
They would get in the way that it's designed, they would get essentially both. So they would be in person for the synchronous learning. So the live session that's happening remotely for some students, those students would be live and be able to ask questions live, but their peers who are remote would also be able to hear those questions and be engaged. But then we've built in there's some additional time where if the synchronous lesson ended at 65 minutes, then those students would still have another 20 minutes in that class potentially, where if they were doing an independent assignment or anything like that, they could get additional support from the teacher in that space.
Yeah. Jen, I'm glad you asked this question because it actually went in a direction that I did not anticipate. It seems like if we were to plan with 6 feet distance and say, you know, we want to have students in the building at some times and, you know, maybe learning remotely some others as part of the hybrid, it doesn't work because of the 6 feet requirement. But you raised a great point, which is if there are sufficient number, or if there are any number of students who opt in to be in the building, that hybrid model actually comes closer to what we probably envision to be the hybrid model. Some students in the building, and you know, sometimes they may not be in the building, they may do remote as well, right? They may opt in and out. Is that how it works?
Yep. And I think it is a good question. I think it brings about good conversation, which, you know, can allow us to go back and look, does it need to be clarified? Does it need to be clear in spaces? But I think they would still have that opportunity. Granted, it wouldn't be the typical 5 days a week. It would depend on their cohort. Plus we have a set day for remote learning because of cleaning in the middle of the week and things like that. But they would be able to get at least 2 days of in-person should they choose.
But where does that leave that teacher who's now under 6 feet, who from the beginning, like we were saying, we wanted 6 feet, like that was where I was coming from, hearing from the majority of staff I spoke to that were very uncomfortable with being within under 6 feet.
Yeah. Again, we wouldn't know, like, we're not saying that they would or wouldn't be under 6 feet in this model. You know, it's likely going to be a much lesser number than full in person, which would allow us to plan the cohorts accordingly. So when cohort A is in, we're able to maintain 6 feet. And when cohort B is in, we're able to maintain 6 feet with them. Could that change based on demand? Certainly. But again, Stephanie's heard it many times in the past 2 weeks. Like, that's one of those ones that it's a question at this point that we don't have an answer for.
I guess I was just thrown because I was under the impression that the hybrid was really for the, I didn't realize it was open to students outside of your higher risk students and students who needed more support. I didn't realize it was open to me saying, you know, that my child really wants to be in school. I just didn't get that impression. So thank you for clarifying. That was new to me this evening.
Yeah, that is, yeah, it's in our document. So, and that wasn't added, that was added on Monday.
And that's also a DESI directive, is it not? Right?
Sorry?
I thought so, yeah.
Any other questions for Stephen?
I just have one. So I'm just sitting here listening. In those classes that are big, and the suggestion is that you could use the library or another room that is not being used at that time for those large classes so that they can maintain that 6 feet distance.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so like the library, the band room, those are like, have more square footage. So I think like in the document, I keep referring to them as non-traditional instructional spaces. So they're not that typical classroom, but could be transformed to allow for some bigger classes. But again, like we have a finite number of those classes. So, and only one class could use them in any given block. So you start to run into conflicts there, but it would allow us some flexibility should numbers grow in a certain class.
If we do use those spaces, does that mean that we're not having band or PE?
No. So the recommendations that came out, I mean, band is really going to be difficult as it is. They're recommending band is virtual or outside right now, the recommendations that came out Friday. So we're going to have to do some planning for that. But currently the band room at the high school is only used for band 1 period a day. So we would have 7 other periods that we could use that space. PE, you know, it would take some logistical planning, and obviously Mother Nature would have to help us out a little bit, but you could plan for half of the, we have the curtain in the gym, so you could have half of the gym for a classroom space and another half for a PE class at certain times of day. Again, none of this is ideal in a typical situation. It's not something that I would even want to consider. Same with the library and some of our bigger classroom spaces. So it's just trying to plug in when and where we could use those.
So one of the conversations that we're going to have and, you know, discuss, because obviously all of us might have different opinions, is that distance and what we want to do with it, what hybrid means and all that, and we can continue that conversation. Anything else specific to the high school?
I think the big thing for me that we'll have to figure out is the logistics of air conditioning when school starts, you know, how the air quality is for them, having windows open, that kind of stuff, obviously, since the high school doesn't have air conditioning.
Yeah, that's.
I think
yeah.
I sent some email to Carol too that included that, you know, are we going to have a heat day for maybe the high school, that if it is too hot that we're watching the index, just an extra area to address.
Yeah, I think you're right, Audrey, and that's certainly something. We have a call on, I don't know, Adam might have some more detail on it. We have a call tomorrow with something regarding HVAC systems. The commissioner did say today on a call that, you know, we would be able to use, essentially said we'd be able to use remote learning days for snow days. So I don't see why we wouldn't be able to use them for heat days in the same vein. So allowing some flexibility there, and that would count towards the 170. So I think those are certainly things to consider. And my feeling is if, the committee has things that they really would like us to reconsider, I'm happy to go back. Our committee is meeting tomorrow morning. I'm happy to go back to them. And, I think in some ways, our committee has been really clear about what their personal feelings are on the three models, but they've also been objective in their planning. And I think they've done a really good job of being open to ideas. And, if we're tasked with making changes, that's what we'll do. We'll go back to it and we'll make the adjustments that people feel are necessary.
I started to think a little bit with like, as far as the hybrid model and kids coming in, would there be more, like if they were only coming in for a period, as far as moving in and out, and lunches also with that hybrid model?
So the hybrid model, if they're coming in, they would come in for the full day. So they would go to all 4 classes that day. And the hybrid model makes lunches certainly more manageable than the in-person. At most we're talking probably 175 to 200 students versus full in-person, we're looking 350 to 400. I think in an in-person, fully in-person, we're looking at up to 4 lunches. And I think Jen Bartos mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, like one of them could start as early as like 10:35. Just to reduce the number in the cafeteria. In a hybrid model, that becomes a little bit more manageable because you're automatically reducing the number of students just by having the cohorts.
I feel like there's a plethora more that we'd have to dive into more once we decide, as far as how that would work with 6th grade potentially being over at high school too.
Yeah, I think that's kind of been the feeling of our committee at some points too. It's really difficult to plan for 3 models when there's so much unknown. Really trying to plan accordingly, but and plan for everything. But every time you get an answer to a question, you have 10 more questions. It makes it really challenging. And and I'm sure in the next 4 weeks, things are going to change even more. So I think our committee is excited in a way to be able to hone in on one of the plans and figure out how to execute that best. That's been one of the things, actually, the feedback that came up today that, and it was one of our teachers that is on the committee that I really appreciated because I keep saying, like, I'm just an English teacher. I'm not a nurse. I don't work for the CDC. And we're doing the best that we can with the information we have. The teacher felt that all 3 plans that we've discussed were educationally sound. And if we can focus on one and building out a robust program on one, then we can do really good by our kids. And that's really at the heart of the work that we want to do. And, the fact that that was said, I felt it in some ways, but you never really know that teacher felt like the plans were educationally sound. That certainly made me feel good about the process that we've gone through the past 2 weeks or so.
Stephen, I see that you had a couple of images and, going back to what Jen was asking about, is this the 3 feet version
Yes.
of that classroom?
Yes.
It would be helpful to see, the 6 feet version as well, if that's going to be available for at least, maybe for Friday or Monday when we're going to have the town hall, just to give an impression as to how classrooms will look like.
Sure, we can do that. We've had them all staged at 3 feet, just to see what we could fit at our max. But we can restage a couple at 6 feet.
Because that one was interesting because at 3 feet, it just says 24, and I think it is this one. And, you know, when you do it at 6 feet, it's 15. Then I'm wondering if it's the positioning. This one actually doesn't look that much different than how they typically are, probably, right?
Right.
But it would be good to give us an impression as to how that 6 feet distance looks like.
Yeah, we can do that. And yeah, it's seat edge to seat edge. So sometimes it does look a little more or less when you're looking at it. But it is the guidance has been seat edge to seat edge.
If there's a possibility that you could do the same room that you already took the pictures in, just to see like that flash from the exact room going back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that. We can have that uploaded into our document, into this document by tomorrow afternoon.
That would be great. Thank you.
Does it make a difference for those classrooms that will be 6th grade classrooms, what size desk they use? You know, like Audrey had said before about the sizes and everything, but they would be different desks for 6th graders in there. So I'm wondering if we would still actually need 3 rooms if the desks are smaller, if it measures out differently. And then I have a question about the ventilation. I've seen guidance, which I guess my reading comprehension needs to be brushed up on, but you know, they're talking about for mass breaks having windows open. Well, East Meadows air conditioned. So are we going to be running the air conditioning with the windows open for ventilation for mass breaks? Like, how is that going to work?
And fans.
Actually, I'm curious whether or not, I thought the ventilation in the East Meadow building really was created to make sure that the circulation was such that, you know, good air coming in, bad air going out, and on top of that we had air conditioning. Is that not what it's
Emory
It
A+.
is, and yeah, and we're looking at school being pushed back to the middle of September. So how much air conditioning will we be using when kids are in school? Plus the ventilation system, like you just mentioned and Bill agreed on, it was developed and engineered to move air throughout the building such that we needed to.
And Emory, you're absolutely.
Oh, sorry, Bill.
No, that's all right. Emory, you're absolutely on track. So John Sullivan even looked it up recently because we got into this conversation. Every room is individual at East Meadow as well. So there's air intake for every room and exhaust for every room. So the air is separate, right? There's air handlers for every classroom. So that's fresh air circulating. And Emory, if you remember, there's sensors on the wall that detect the CO2 in the room and automatically increase. And Stephanie, you're nodding too, because when you came through for the walkthroughs, remember at the beginning of the project, there's sensors on each wall so that when the CO2 level happens to go up because there's more people in the room, the fan circulation increases automatically. So that system is by itself far and you know, beyond, you know, anything that we're looking at. But the other thing is you can open the windows with the air conditioner on. So the only thing it's going to do is if it's warmer out, it's going to increase the call for cold air. If it's cooler out, it's going to decrease the call for cold air, and it's still going to circulate air. So opening the windows shouldn't affect that at all. I mean, it's like in the winter, right? If when I taught, you know, my 15 years in a classroom, I had my window open every day. I was a germaphobe, so I always had a window open a crack just to let air flow through my classroom, you know? So no, that shouldn't affect it at all. And you know, for our building, and the air circulating is definitely, you know, not an issue. Sorry, Stephanie.
Thank you.
No, that's okay. That was pretty much what I was gonna get at too, Bill, was just devil's advocate would be, I mean, essentially you're also gonna have windows open for mass breaks during the winter, and then the heat's gonna be, you know, trying to make up for that as well. And it's gonna go.
Right. Well, that was my point. Just that we have this building that's got new stuff. So
right. So that's different. My other question is, with all of these, the hybrid and in-person for both schools, have there been any, and I know this is so premature, but it's going to be a big factor, any cost financials of what the PP, what we've already spent, what we would need to continue to spend, or busing, all of those factors I think are going to play, unfortunately, a big role in any of these decisions. Is there any thing, Adam, that you can enlighten us with?
Yeah, so as far as the transportation, and I'll be on the high school's meeting tomorrow morning to kind of review the guidance. So as far as transportation, until we know what plan we're going to go with, I think the plan is to then send out a transportation type survey and get some more feedback. So transportation is kind of, along with a lot of other things, on the back burner for right now. But as far as costs, I mean, yeah, so the CDC provided us, and when I say us, the district, and more specifically Nancy, with a 3-month projection of what we need to have based on the number of staff, number of students that we have in our building. So we've just spent about $40,000 on 3 months worth of PPE supplies. There are some grant opportunities for us. We are still waiting on some MEMA money that the town applied for. But unfortunately, we can't wait to see if we're going to get that money in order to purchase supplies that we're going to need for the start of school. So yes, there was that. And then the next biggest cost, which we were going to do anyway, but this accelerated it, was making sure every student was one-to-one device. So those have been the 2 biggest costs for us to get school in whatever capacity up and running for the fall.
All right, and then it was my understanding that we were looking into and possibly needing the sanitizing stations, like in each classroom. The plexiglass, I know, was a very expensive cost that we were talking about troubleshooting, like some DIY things possibly. Like those are all just the little things that I feel like, unfortunately, is just going to continue to raise some questions and weigh out the different options.
Yeah, we're.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No,
go ahead.
I'm so sorry, everybody, that I keep doing that too.
No, that's good.
I need to raise my hand. How do I not know this? Is there a way to do some sort of projected cost analysis with each option? Like, when we've analyzed anything else relating to a budget change, that would be, I mean, even just like a ballpark, like, I don't know, anything. Sorry, that's it.
So I'm going to ask a real dumb question, and I don't mean this any other way, but what types of costs would we like to project for each model?
The needing of one-to-one, that doesn't matter. Whatever we choose, we're choosing to do the one-to-ones. But I guess more like if we're going to go in person, say there's going to be 2 routes, like potentially maybe we won't have to do double routes, but if we did, like we're between this cost and this cost, versus if we do go fully online, which there's still going to be a form of hybrid because there's going to be kids that are allowed to come in because of, like what are the tax costs?
So it sounds like you're referencing really the transportation, which I totally get, and that's the biggest question,
well, but
not
also
just for us.
PPE is going to be huge if we're in person.
So again, and Nancy, just if you're on, hop on and correct me if I'm wrong. The 3-month projection from the CDC was to cover every person if they were to return to in-school instruction. Okay, so they give you, we fed them some of our demographics, teachers, students. Nancy, again, jump on if I'm missing anything. We gave them information, and then they spit back some projections as to what we should have on hand for in-student instruction, only for 3 months worth of school.
So we went and purchased the 12-week supply based off of the guidance. So we are getting some of that supplies in now to cover that at 100% attendance. Again, if for some reason we go hybrid and we don't use it all up right away, it will be consumed at some point. In terms of the hand sanitizer, we ordered over 300 gallons of hand sanitizer, but my biggest thing that I would promote at this point, particularly at East Meadow, where there is a sink in every classroom, is that people are washing their hands with soap and water. That really should be the first place that people are going to. Hand sanitizer, yes, can be a backup, but soap and water, washing hands is really one of the best ways to reduce the spread.
I agree. I guess so then it would be, if we know what a 3-month projection is, then what would it be for the whole school year of masks? Like Stephanie said, the plexiglass that we potentially need, like just to try to put together like a cost analysis. This is what it's going to be if we're in school full year.
One of the challenges that I'm going to bring to the room, and it's kind of been one of the issues that we've been having and trying to work with vendors, and working with a great vendor right now, is the fact that demand and supply, there is a very high supply need. So the cost is driving everything up, and just being able to find the PPE. So we could have projections right now, and Adam, chime in if you can, that may be okay now, but when it's time to order it, may drive the cost up, and even being able to find it. So that's just one thing I would like you to keep in mind, that has been a barrier that we've been working around right now.
Yeah, to Nancy's point, it's kind of, and I totally understand the need and your request for projection, but it's kind of hard to project a moving target that's moving, on a daily, weekly basis. I totally understand we need it, but it's so hard. There's so many factors out there to be able to say, we're going to project this amount of either actual PPEs or the cost of PPEs. And I couldn't stand behind that number, because it would be pure, a shot in the dark as to what that cost may be.
So just going back to what you said earlier, Adam, and for clarification, especially when it comes to these extra costs related to prevention, such as hand hygiene and other PPE, we hope at the very least and expect that will be coming from some grants anyway, right? You mentioned FEMA, MEMA. We hope that it's not going to end up being an additional cost for our budget. In fact, the resolution that we voted on a while ago was asking the state to make sure that we're receiving additional funds to be able to cover those. Would that be a fair statement and expectation, or would that be too optimistic and that may not happen? And therefore, what the other members are asking would be really important for us to know at that point.
Yeah, no, that is certainly our hope. Unfortunately, we have to front it from our budget to make sure that we receive these things in a timely manner before school starts. So, yeah, the hope is we put in for a lot of this stuff. We put in for the one-to-one, a lot of some network upgrades, some licensing upgrades, along with PPEs. We put into that FEMA MEMA grant that the town submitted. Again, we've been having a hard time getting some clarification on when we may or how receive those monies. But for the time being, we need to front that money to make sure we have it in our possession prior to school starting.
I know that we don't know this yet, but with transportation I want to say it's a little under 1/8 of our total operating budget, actually. It's a very high number. So if we did have to run multiple routes, that's something that I was really concerned about. And I looked into other districts, and people are maybe looking at how they operate their buses and who's, I guess how the runs would work, what it would look like. Have we looked into any of that?
Again, we haven't, only because at least for my piece, the financial piece, until we know exactly what, no pun intended, what route we're going to get back to school, we don't even know how we're going to get kids back there yet. So I know, or I think once after this discussion, or we vote very soon on which way we're going to go, we're then going to go out and survey the parents to see, okay, who who will be sending their kids to school. If you're sending them, are you going to be using the bus? Are you not going to be using the bus? Because we're going to need that information then to drive our discussion with the bus company. And we also have to keep in mind that we share the bus company contract with 2 other districts, right? So we kind of have to be in sync with what their schedule is. So, you know, our buses are free at the time that we need them.
Okay.
I will say I was on a call yesterday, a transportation call. So the guidance right now, I'm not sure if everyone's seen it for transportation, but on a normal big bus, a normal regular school bus, the guidance is, and if you can picture it, I should have put this in the folder for tonight, but I'll provide it for tomorrow morning.
Can we pull
you
up
see
the
the rows?
I think Emery would have.
There is a picture.
Because I actually did have a question about it that I was going to not ask tonight, but since you brought it up.
So
right here, I'll just pull it.
Yeah, so if we can look at it, they want one person, so they want you offset in the row. Unless you are with a sibling, then 2 of you can be in that same seat. And what they want, so it seems easy when they talk about it, but what they want is to load the bus all the way to the back and move, you know, as students get on, make their way up to the front. And when we get to school and drop kids off, the kids from the front get off first and the kids from the back last. So you're limiting the amount of exposure to each other getting on and off the bus. So based on that, you know, we'd have to look at our cohorts and make sure that, you know, we're designing the routes where we could satisfy that guidance from the state. On the call yesterday, what they're trying to do, they're gonna go to the transportation committee, I believe, and see if one person is sitting all the way to the window, is there a way to get one extra person in a seat so we could kind of increase the capacity on the buses? They were going to send out a diagram or the presentation once they were going to present it. So once I have it, I can share that with you guys. But what they're trying to do is add some capacity to these buses because right now, just the way that it's the guidance is it limits, it handcuffs us to not transporting a lot of students at once and having to do 2, maybe 3 routes, depending on how we're gonna sort it out. So again,
go ahead.
Yep, go ahead.
No, what I was gonna say, if you're seeing on your screen, what the proposed model, and this is the document that Desi sent to us. It was in our folder. When you look at any type of bus, you see that the capacity that can be utilized is dropping pretty dramatically based on the new requirements. So if you had an 83 passenger bus, now you are down to 27 passengers in there. And all these numbers that you are seeing, 47 down to 15. If we get requests from the parents and students to use the buses, let's say close to their capacity, and this capacity I'm talking about, we may need to, do multiple routes, and that adds to the complexity. But chances are, when we decide with the model that we want to pursue, we may hear from the parents and students that they really want to drive on their own, or they want to drive their own student, and some may still want to ride the bus. Unfortunately, the only visual that they seem to have added, where is it? I don't know if we have these very large buses that, that's right here, and it's very similar to what I was showing before. But I guess the idea is they want to keep one student all the way to the window, and the other one comes to the aisle, and the next row does the opposite, so they can keep students away from each other, with the exception that if you have 2 students from the same household, 2 siblings basically, they can sit next to each other because they are coming from the same household. I don't know what that means in terms of this picture. it looks like it is actually now shortening the distance between
Right.
Those two students and the one behind them. So those are things to consider, but this is part of the DESE guidance that is in our folders.
So in a couple other things too. One, they're suggesting that we place monitors on the bus. That's going to be an additional cost, and they're suggesting the monitor take the place of the bus driver, making sure kids have their masks on, they're sitting in the proper seat, and they can focus on the road and getting the kids to school or home safely. So adding a monitor to the bus is going to be a cost if we happen to go that way. What this plan also doesn't incorporate, right? It's optional. Yep, they're not mandating it. It's not, I don't want to say it's part of their guidance, but they're suggesting, I guess, if that's different from guidance, they're suggesting you have one. Also, what this plan does not include is van transportation, which is how our special education students get to school. That's totally separate guidance that hasn't even come out yet. So I just want everyone to keep that in the back of their mind, that that's totally separate from regular school day education and would be an additional cost. And then third, and this is just an FYI, and I've said this before, the Mass General Law says we do not have to transport anybody to school that lives less than 2 miles away, and we don't have to transport anybody to school from 7th to 12th grade. Just want to keep that out there, that, depending on what plan we go with and how this. So Mass General Law says as a school department, you're required to transport anyone to school K through 6th grade over 2 miles. You have to provide transportation for them. Anything under that 2 miles, you can provide it, or they can they can transport themselves to school. The law also states that we only have to provide transportation for K through 6. So the secondary 7 through 12, we do not have to legally provide transportation for. So I just, again, yep.
So my next follow-up question would be for the families that are under 2 miles and need their kid to go on a bus. Can they drop them off at another bus station, or stop, or that's just it, you're out of luck, buddy?
Yeah, so yes. What has been discussed, though, on the call, not only yesterday, but prior to that, is reimbursing for parents that do not want to put their kids on the bus, but do want to drive them to school, figuring out some type of reimbursement for them. Again, that's in the talks. It sounds like if that was to come to that, it'd be a district decision. But there's a lot of open questions, like Stephen alluded to. There's still a lot of open questions on transportation. And again, we can't drill into it until we know exactly which way we're going to go.
Thank you, Adam. That was kind of my question. I had heard, some talk in other districts where they've already essentially said it's off the table for 7 to 12 because of, A, B, C, D. I wasn't sure if that was a talk that as we get closer, of course, we're probably going to have. So thank you for all of that. That was very helpful.
Yeah, and as far as I know, and Stephen or Allie, if they want to jump in, we don't have many high school kids that take the bus. So again, depending on what plan we do, and then we send that survey out, we might not have any high schoolers that take the bus. It might help us out, right there. So again, it's just kind of sitting and waiting to see what plan we go with.
I do have a question about transportation as well. Typically Children First has been a bus stop with before school care. Would they, they're all, I imagine that they're still going there. I don't know, I haven't heard, but if they were all picked up at the same stop, would they be allowed to sit next to each other on the bus? And then what about bus stops? We've done over the last several years, we've gone to group bus stops where there's 3, 4, 5, 6 kids that get together and get on the bus. So they're seeing each other, they're waiting with each other? Like, are those kids allowed to be able to sit next to one
So
another?
the guidance from DESI is strictly household members are the only ones that can sit next to each other on the bus. That's it. If you're not from the same household, you cannot share the same seat on a bus.
I believe it was in the plan too. They even talked about potentially painting the ground outside and like marking off 6 feet at bus stops.
Correct. Yeah, they're telling, kids have to stand 6 feet apart at bus stops.
Yeah, I saw that.
Like you said, Adam, even the sibling, or someone had mentioned, even with the sibling, it's still, with that picture that Desi just showed us, it's going to infringe on the distance from the person behind or in front. So I think that's all still it's very new. You know, this guidance.
Right. So what that diagram doesn't show is that you have 2 siblings in one of those seats. You're going to now offset that next row even more because you won't have that proper distance. So yeah. Yep.
So we're at 9:45. This turned into a longer meeting than I had anticipated, but awesome questions, because honestly, I'm just writing things that, having read all those pages, and I thought, I probably had all the questions that are possible. Tons of new questions. I really appreciate it. I have one last question, but I want to ask if there is anything else that anyone wanted to ask. So my last question that I wanted to just clarify is related to the frequency of sanitizing the schools. Do we know what that looks like? How often will we be sanitizing the schools? What does it mean? Are we going to spray the classrooms? Is that something else? Do we have any idea?
That should be in the plan. There should be information that John put in the plan under facilities.
Yeah, and what is it?
What's in the plan? He put in the plan the schedules and how cleaning is going to take place. I mean, you can pull the section up on the plan.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah, I don't have it right off the top of my head, Emery, but I will
Emery, I feel like you opened up another can of worms on me, though. I
didn't have any questions, but if we're going there.
All right, now,
you can't say it.
Kids that are responsible for the cleaning? What is the cleaning?
You can't say it's 9:45 and then say, well, how are we going to clean all this stuff?
All right, so facilities. So here's the thing. When I downloaded to read on my own, there was no facilities section. It was to be completed. So I'm glad that there is some more information in there.
We tried really hard the past few days to make sure that we,
I know. As I think Stephen was saying it, I did that. I downloaded, and then today I was, I went back and looked at these documents. They are different, from the format to the content. So I appreciate all the work.
Yeah, you can thank Al, Megan, Sue. There were a few people that were all on it at the same time, making sure the links worked. And
yeah, I was looking at this over the weekend, and then I was reading it last night and then this morning. It changed a lot.
So this is talking about developing operational protocols. Let me just share my screen very quickly so everybody can see if we have anybody left online. Oh, look at that. We have a lot of folks online. Thank you. I believe this is the.
So I think up at the top, he has how they're going to go through. But are you looking for like what chemicals he's going to be using?
No. What does it mean? I mean, I know that it means different things for different institutions or buildings. Sometimes they go and spray the whole thing. They have the containers, and then they have the sprayer, and then they spray. In some places, it may mean different things. It may be just wiping off the desks or whatever it might be. I just wanted to know whether we have, some details around that.
Adam, do you have, I know he spoke today about the spray that just disappears.
Yeah, so again, I guess there's a couple of questions, Emily, that you're asking is to what we're going to use and to how. So I guess to the what, there are some recommended chemicals that we have purchased that we will use. I know the stuff that John is using is you kind of just spray in the air and it I don't want to say evaporates, but you leave it alone. You just spray it and it'll clean and disinfect surfaces. As to what we're cleaning, there is guidance. There is guidance from DESE that kind of gives you the examples as to what exactly we should be cleaning every day: chair arms, chair legs, desktops, like anything we can. It's going to sound stupid, but anything we can touch really and that the virus can cling to is what we should be wiping down every day. And then when we're going to, on Wednesdays, not have everyone in the building, do a little deeper, more extensive clean of all those things.
Can we make that, I really appreciate that. That's very helpful, especially the first part, the spraying the air, and that's what I was visualizing. But can we just make that, can we add that to the section? Because that's something that a lot of folks asked about. How are we going to make sure that, the school's clean? What is the frequency and all that? It would help us answer those questions in the version that we're going to be sharing, and then potentially when we have our meeting on Monday at the public forum.
Sure. Yep.
Thank you.
If we're going to add that, could we also, if we're going there, are the kiddos cleaning their own supplies? How often is that happening? I know as a parent, that's especially with the younger ones, that's more of my questions. How many chemicals are my 6-year-old going to come in contact with, and what does it mean? I guess those are the questions where if we're going there, I guess we'll go all the way in there.
Stephanie, I can tell you that Bill brought that up at our meeting with the reopening plan, and it was frowned upon that the kids would do the cleaning. And because I brought up that they clean their desks on Friday, why couldn't it be their Chromebook or whatever? But no. And if Bill is here, he can jump on and tell you what he told us about children cleaning in the classroom. But then on the flip side, is it going to be the teachers doing it?
Right, there's no good side.
Yeah, right. So I think it would be, at least it was my impression and John's and our custodial staff that, in between at least classes and stuff for the day, that the teachers would be wiping down immediate surfaces. And I'm not saying every leg or every armchair, but desktops and immediate surfaces, because we're just not going to have the capacity to be doing that in between classes. We're going to be struggling to have the capacity to do that on the Wednesdays when no one's even in the building. So we definitely wouldn't ask the students to do that by any means, but the teachers will have to take part in some of that cleaning.
I think it's a great point, and I think we can, as a leadership team, we can get together and we can put, all that down, and we can finalize what it looks like and what it's going to be and how it's going to work and what's going to be used. And to your point, Emery, we'll just put that in for the next meeting, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be very helpful.
I did review the MSDS sheets for the cleaner today on the EPA website, and John had also sent it to me. It's a spray and go chemical that's approved to kill COVID. It normally needs to sit for about 5 minutes, so there should be no reason and need to wipe it off the surface as long as no one's touched it in that time frame.
So if that process occurs when no one's in the building or in the classroom, that's very helpful. There should be no need to wipe anything off. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
No, go to calendar.
All right. I don't mean to really cut the conversation, but we're going to have more of this. This was, again, very helpful. Let's just move on to the calendar. And
We still have executive session, right?
Yes. Emery, so we did kind of outline it in the plan. It's on page 7.
Page 7. Page 7.
Hey, I don't mean to interject here, but who do you want here? Who do you not want here?
Say it again.
So,
And you go home.
the extra panelists, who doesn't need to be here right now?
I think they all can if they want to.
Yeah, everybody can stay. We're still in the open session.
Right. But do you want me to put them back in attendees?
No, they're okay.
Oh, they're fine.
Okay, my apologies.
Yeah. No, thank you for asking. Maybe not Allison, but you know, that's okay.
I'll keep her there.
Okay. All right. So page 7, you said, right? Okay. So let me just go back.
Not a calendar, it's a paragraph.
Yeah, that was my misunderstanding. I apologize.
So in aligning to the guidance that we received, I think you got to go down a little bit more. That we received, no, the other way. No. It's the paragraph where it says academic calendar. So I'm, okay, right there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, you want the paragraph? Okay, sorry.
Yes, paragraph. So we received the guidance that we need to add 10 additional days to the calendar for professional development. So the regular calendar had the district starting school on for new teachers on the 21st of August and the 24th. Those were their 2 orientation days. And then teachers starting on the 25th. With adding the 10 additional days, we're moving it to Wednesday, October 26th. And that will take—
Wait a minute, Carol, not October. October?
No, August, sorry. August 26th, which would be the Wednesday. So we would have 3 days that first week of professional development. We would have 4 the next week because the 4th is off. And then we'd have 4 again. Wait a minute, this isn't right.
No.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
No, Carol, it should have been the same start. It would have been 4, 4, and 4.
Right, I just saw that. Thanks.
Yep.
The 25th, so the 25th to 26th, 27, 28 would be 1 week. Then we'd have the 31st, the 1st, the 2nd, and the 3rd. And then the last week of PD would be the 8th, the 9th, the 10th, and the 11th. So we would start school in order, nope, Stephen, it is the 26th. So we want to stagger the kids coming in. So if you look at the little charts down below, if you just scroll up a little bit, what we're saying is that all of the students, all of the teachers would come in. New teachers would be the 24th and the 25th. East Meadow staff would start Wednesday, the 26th, and go through September 15th. And then Granby Junior Senior High School, 26th to the 15th. But the reason we're saying to the 15th is because on Monday, the 14th, we would have only some grades going in at East Meadow and some grades going in at the high school. So if you scroll up a little bit more. Okay, so we're saying if a little down because I can't read right. So we're saying in-person learning, everything would start Wednesday, the 16th for everyone, okay? But grades 1 through 3 would have their orientation day on Monday, the 14th, and grades 4 through 6 would have their orientation on Tuesday, the 15th. So by starting the 26th, it gives all the teachers the 12 days, because on Monday, grades 4 through 6 are not in school. So those teachers have that as a day for planning and prepping. And then opposite, when the 4 to 6 kids are in there, the teachers in grades 1 to 3 are not there.
So I don't know if the background is clear, but just for, you know, those folks who may be watching, we already had some PD days planned in our original calendar, but in light of the preparation that is needed, the adjustment that is needed, DESE first came and said we need 5 additional days for PD at the beginning of the school year. Then that number changed to 10 days. So we added those 10 days on top of the days that we had, and I think that's the 12 that you're talking about,
Right.
Which as a result pushed out the start date for the students. And the other ramification from a student's perspective potentially is that whatever new number of days are added to the calendar for professional development, they are now reduced from the total number of days that students are required to be in the school. So as probably all of you know, it's 180 days for a school year. Those 10 days being deducted from it, now we are down to 170 school days.
Yes.
That students have to be in the school.
Correct. So this would allow us to have everyone, kindergarten and preschool would then, we would all be in class on the 16th of September.
Yep.
Any questions, Audrey? I saw you had a hand up.
I was glad that you clarified the 1 day versus the 1 day, because I think when I first read it, I was like, oh, okay, this kid will go on this day, and then this kid will start on that day, not realizing it was 1 on, 1 off.
Right, we did that because we wanted to make sure that the school had less students in it, so that we could get so we could have the room to maneuver around the building. You practice walking in the hallways, you know, practice going to lunch, because we'll be able to get the whole grade in, you know, for lunch. So it gives us an opportunity for them to practice.
One other thing is that the calendar in our folder is not the updated to that information.
No.
No, well, that's why you guys got to, you guys are voting that we're going to change this calendar.
Got it.
So do we have to vote tonight?
Well, we
Can we
can't
vote,
vote tonight because we don't know what model we're going with, right?
Yeah, also, it would be great if we have the calendar in front of us, Carol, then we can just, you know, better visualize and vote. I think we know that we're going to have to add those 10 days anyway.
Right.
So if you don't mind.
The question was, last time, everybody was pushing because they wanted to know when school was going to start.
Right.
And so that's why we worked to work it out so that we were able to say to parents, okay, you know, you're not starting like you thought on the 27th of August. You're now not starting till the 16th.
Should we approve?
So yeah, I just wanted to, I'm sorry, Audrey, our committee really felt strongly that we need to get something out to parents about the change in start date. And I think that's a reason that we were hoping, and it wouldn't change regardless of what model. The only thing would change is the 14th and 15th. Those would just be PD days or virtual meetings with students, if it was hybrid or remote. Completely up to you, but that was just our committee. Some of the parents and families felt like they just wanted some clarity because right now they're still thinking it's August 27th.
Okay, so let's just, since we don't have the full calendar, we can just vote for the full calendar later, but we can change the start date and vote for the new start dates. Can you help us out what those start dates are going to be again for?
So,
It's in the plan, right?
yeah,
But can we just have it, you know,
so the 26th, are you looking for students? You want to know students or you not?
yes, I want this, the portion, the section that will affect the parents. That was a concern. Yep.
So the first round, first students that will go, and Stephen, if you're on there, you can tell me what grades, because I think, let me see if I've got them.
7 through 9, the 14th.
Well, I think we're saying the first official day of school is September 16th.
Right.
And that's for all grades, all students, right?
Yep.
Yes.
So they're saying, so the regardless of plan is the September 16th, but if we go with a hybrid or a remote model, then then that would still be the 16th. But if we're going in person, then we have these other days. So the start date is not actually the 16th.
But
So
if you,
those days, though, the start of school for our 170 is the 16th. The 14th and 15th would technically be optional for families to come in, but they're required for teachers because they would be considered the professional development days. We would just use using.
We counted that 14th as one day for those students that are attending, and we counted the 15th for the other students as day one for the day they were attending, because it's an actual day that they're in the building. So that was day one for those students. The 16th being the first day everybody's in the building together, but otherwise it is just the 14th is day one for the group that comes in that day. The 15th is day one for the group that comes in that day. And that pushed the final day of school to June 11th. So I think that's important to note as well. So the final day of school will be June 11th instead of June 10th, because by moving the days the way we did, even though they reduced it to 170, we still needed to make up for one more day on the calendar. So we checked and double checked it, and Emery, we can get a calendar together, no problem. So we can have Jacqueline do that. But I think the start dates being the 14th and 15th for students, depending on that schedule, and then the June 11th as the last day would be the main points that you would be voting on, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
and the September 14th or 15th, they are not grade based. They are, what are they based on?
They're grade based.
Can you share the grades for the 2 days?
on the 14th, it's grades 1 through 3 and 7 through 9.
Okay.
And on the 15th, it's 4 through 6 and 10 through 12.
So what happens to K, pre-K?
They start on the 16th because that is the day that the commissioner said school must start by.
Usually, Emery, we always delay pre-K and K anyway, if you remember. They always come in a couple of days later. Unfortunately, we won't have, I mean, everybody's coming in several days later, right? But we don't have the luxury to say, yeah, we'll give 2 or 3 days at the beginning. Plus, the other thing is those days are usually used for visitation for families, which we're not going to be able to do this year. It's all going to have to be virtual because we're not going to be having the families coming in physically into the building.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. That was helpful. So can we have a motion to change the start date for the 2020-2021 school year to September 14 for grades 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, and to September 15 for grades 4, 5, 6, 10, 11, 12, and September 16 for pre-K and K.
Well,
I'll
that would
make
be
the
all grades.
motion.
Pardon me?
That would be, the 16th would be all grades, full return.
Actually,
Yes.
that's probably a better way of saying it. Yes, and September 16th for all grades to return.
But Audrey had a question beforehand, so I don't know if we we should probably hear her question before. You're on mute.
Well, we
I know.
can
It's
actually do the motion and then still get questions. That's
Not a problem.
okay.
I'll make them. Yep. Okay. I'll second.
Oh, third.
Thank you. Now, Audrey, we can go to your question.
I don't even want to open a can of worms. I'm fine. It's just case screening. Case screening. It's just, we got to write that down to talk about when is kindergarten screening that usually would have happened in the spring be happening and how.
Okay.
Because with this, they need those PD days, so they can't be screening, and now all their kids are starting and they've never screened them.
Okay, fair. Good question. So just to make sure, we are voting to change the start date, school start date for the school year 2020-2021 to September 14 for grades 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, to September 15 for grades 4, 5, 6, 10, 11, 12, and all grades September 16. There was a motion and a second. All in favor to approve this motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstention? All right, so approved unanimously. Thank you all very
Emery,
much.
quick
Yes.
question. Did you need to amend and change the final day to June 11th?
Actually, that's a good point. We missed that one.
I'm
So,
sorry.
no, actually, I'm going to make that a second motion. Can we have a motion to change the final day of school for school year 2020-2021 to June 11?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you. Any discussion, any question? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? All right, approved unanimously. Thank you all again.
Thank you very much. That's one thing off
Thank you all
our
very
plate.
much. Yep. So with that, just let me quickly look at our agenda. Cheryl, I don't know if you had anything pressing as superintendent report. I mean,
So-
Carol, sorry.
That's okay.
We're getting used to it.
No, it's okay because in the office, they would do that all the time too. I think Adam kind of
Are you good?
calls me Curl or something like that, you know.
Do you have anything to share?
Yes, I had two things. So the first thing, I'm sure Emery shared with you a recent article that was in the Boston Globe that outlined some concerns that the district was asking parents to waive their rights. I have sent a letter to all of the parents in the district, letting them know that all of the actions that were taken by the department were based on guidance from the Department of Education and our attorneys. The difference is our attorneys did want parents to sign something. I didn't agree with that. So for me, it was a notification to parents. And the article made it seem like we were having them waive all their rights for special education, when all we were asking was for them to hold us harmless to the fact that we were making meetings by phone instead of mail, that we were couldn't guarantee that all team members could attend because many of them were home with their children. And the fact that we were out of sync with timelines. So we weren't asking parents to, waive their rights to special education services. We were just asking them, if you want us to hold an IEP meeting, we're gonna try and do it, but we can't give you a 10-day notice because we don't have anybody to do any of the mailing. And some of the members are going to not be able to attend and they would send in a report. Unfortunately, that's not how it got construed in the article. So I did write a response. It's posted on the website. And I just want, the parents in the community to know that we put our kids first. And we certainly had no intentions of waiving any rights to services. So I just wanted to put that out there. The other thing is some great news. I told you last time that we had applied for a summer learning grant. And I was excited because I thought, okay, maybe nobody's bringing their kids back, so maybe we get the money. Well, we got the money. So we got $11,000. It's not $1 million, but it's $11,000 that it's going to help, fund those extra kids that we brought in this summer for learning. So.
Well, that's great news. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Is that it, Carol?
That's it for me.
Yep. So just a quick note on that article. It was kind of interesting that Boston Globe started an article or wrote an article that started with Granby. Probably a lot of people were confused and they were trying to find Granby on the map anyway. But as you read through the article, you realize that even based on the conversations they had, the services were delivered on time. But as Carol said, it is really the most important thing is that we put students first, and the success of our special education programs over the last several years were because we absolutely put the students first. And I'm glad that you were able to write that letter and share with us, Carol.
You're welcome.
Adam, do you have anything to share?
Not really. I'd like to, we're closing up FY20, but I kind of like to meet with the subcommittee first before we do anything in the full committee. And as far as facilities, I mean, we've been kind of, John's got a pretty long list of getting the buildings up and running for the start of school whenever and however that may be. So as far as facilities, he's going crazy every day to make sure we're getting these buildings where they should be for kids to come back in whatever capacity.
Yep. And I appreciate that it's really busy time for us as we're planning for, as we're putting these plans together for the reopening. But at one point when we have some breathing room, if we can look at the maintenance plan, that you guys put together, that will be great, so that we can share it with the community as well. And we would, we can have some conversation.
Certainly, and I don't know if this has ever been, if we've discussed this over the last few meetings, but we are down a full custodian. So we usually had 5 custodians. We did have to let one go about a month and a half ago. So we are down a custodian. We certainly, John and his staff can certainly get the work done. Having that extra custodian would be pretty beneficial, especially going into this school year, but we're going to hold off on that until we know exactly the way we're going into the school year. So I just want everyone to know, if they don't, that we are down a full-time custodian as of right now.
Okay, thank you. Just quickly, for everyone who may not have heard or attended the town meeting, our FY21 school budget was approved at the town meeting last Saturday. That is basically the budget that the school committee approved at our meeting a few meetings ago. I just want to make sure that I take a moment to thank everyone involved. It always makes it easy for all of us involved in the process, whether it's the school committee, the finance committee, our town administrator, the select board, when we are all in agreement with respect to the school budget, and it makes it easy for all of us to present, and it makes it easier for the public to understand that it is really what the school budget should be. I wanna especially thank Chris Martin, because at a point where there were multiple scenarios that we were chasing and we had to create, Chris was very helpful in basically providing a balanced budget to the finance committee, which ended up being our final budget. Again, a lot of work goes into making sure that we have a budget that we can all agree on. I think that made it a lot easier. So thank you, and hopefully we can continue that collaboration for our upcoming budgets as well.
Emery, I should have probably mentioned this, sorry, just to kind of piggyback on that. So the state did approve a 4-month budget for FY21 that'll take us to or through October 31st. And what that did was fund states, municipalities, and school districts at the proposed levels back in the first iteration of the governor's budget, or that's what they're hoping to do. I don't know if it's gone through legislation yet, but that's what they're hoping to do. So we shouldn't, at least through October 31st, and Emery and I talked about that this morning, hopefully after that, we should see the level funding that we got approved at town meeting. So I just want everyone to know, at least through October 31st, there is an interim budget in place at the funding levels we were approved at town meeting. What goes on after that, I'm not sure, but I've heard and read that they're going to try to stay away from Chapter 70 and all those funds. And there's a lot of coronavirus relief funds that either are available already or will be available. I know Cheryl used to talk about it, how we used to have Race to the Top back in 2008 after the huge economic disaster. It seems like this next round of stimulus should have one of those packages in it. So I'll keep everyone up to date as, you know, more information becomes available, but we should be in a place where we can operate as planned, and we don't see any cuts really to our revenue for at least this fiscal year. The next few might be a little tough, but at least for this fiscal year, we should be able to operate without any problems.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Jen, was there anything related to CS that you wanted to share quickly? Jen Millette?
Yeah, I have August 12th. We have a meeting.
Okay. All right. So we'll hear more from you at that time. So believe it or not, that's the end of our regular agenda, and we have hopefully a short executive session that will follow. So we're going to vote to enter into executive session under, oh, actually, let me just take a step back. Just to remind everyone, in case they were not at the beginning, we will have a public forum, not a public hearing, public forum, an open conversation related to the opening plans, reopening plans. On Monday, August 3rd, we will determine the time and post it tomorrow, or inform everyone about it tomorrow. And we will also change the date of our school committee meeting that was scheduled for August 4th, Tuesday, August 4th. We're going to move it to Wednesday, August 5th. And potentially we're going to change the start time of that as well to 6 o'clock. We're going to be posting, so we'll inform everyone once it is posted, and we're going to post it on our website as well. So with that, go ahead.
Can you send, I'm trying to find that link you sent.
The link to?
Yeah, the link to that, to the executive session.
Alex,
so I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it right now, Carol. It's not a link. It's just a meeting ID and a passcode.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
we just got it in our email today.
Have you seen my email?
We just got it in email. Good luck.
So we'll get you one as soon as we get there.
I'm trying to find it. I'm really trying.
So we'll make sure that
if you can search for Alex's name.
I found it. It was so far deep. Okay.
Cool.
All right.
So we will vote to enter into executive session under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Part A3, to discuss strategy with regard to collective bargaining, as doing so in an open session may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee. the committee will not return to open session. Jacqueline, if you're still with us, can you help us with a roll call, please?
Ms. Parent? Ms. Parent?
You're on
You're
mute.
Sorry, I.
Oh, okay. Ms. Mallett?
Aye.
Ms. Studa? Aye. Ms. Bartos?
Aye.
Mr. Evan?
Aye. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for staying with us through the meeting, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Bye. Have a good night.